go ahead and get started with the specially called, and if Ms. Martin's able to join in, we can add her. Ms. Kinzer, I'll turn it over to you for a roll call.
Ms. Parker,
Here.
Ms. Martin, hopefully joining us. Mr. Pennings, here. Mr. Moore is absent. Mr. Atkinson is absent. Mr. Bates is absent. Mr. Beaver, here. Ms. Powers is absent. Ms. Morency, here. Mr. Dudley. Here.
Thank you, Ms. Kinzer. Next, I think we probably need to adopt the agenda. Do we have a motion to adopt the agenda? Motion by Mr. Dudley, second by Mr. Pennings. Any discussion? I will say I will not vote to adopt this agenda because I thought that we were just going to be covering the BEP, and I don't know what these other ones are. When I looked at it this morning, these other things were not listed as being budget amendments. Reimbursement and revenue from parallel, and then to cover parallel fees for substitute teachers.
I can speak to that. The revenues were for rent. They rent from, well, for this year it would have been August through June.
That's not the point. The point is that we were supposed to have budget amendments in for the only thing that we disclose, and specially called meetings are pretty specific in what we can have, and we only represented to the public that we were going to take up the difference between BEP. So I don't understand why we're adding these things on here when we didn't disclose that to the public.
So what we have, completely understand where you're coming from, completely understand. And that was one of the reasons why I kind of uploaded the rationale as Jake Wollerver and I talked about, and we uploaded that rationale as soon as we could. These are other things that popped up that we discovered that need to be cleaned up before June 30th, and lucky we can get that into the county commission before tomorrow at 4:30 so that we don't incur audit findings. For example, the one that I have, the 7152 and 7153, these were things that were found out last week, and through research discovered that, yes, those were actually overages as of yesterday afternoon. So, and what it came out to be is liability charges, and then adjusting the salaries for Shirley Johnson and for Kim Doddridge. And if we don't get those fixed, then they will be audit findings, and we still have time to get them fixed.
Right.
But completely understand your position.
I just don't, I wish Jake was here in all honesty, because I don't think that this is what we represented to the public that we were going to be taking up.
Okay.
And I actually probably would like a legal opinion on that before we go forward.
Okay.
So we'll take a break, and I'll give him a call.
Okay.
Mr. Dudley?
What's the differences between today and last week? I mean, we had, I'd done 17, 18 budget amendments Monday evening.
Yes, sir.
And why were these not found earlier?
So for mine, I was included in an email, and until I got back and started checking my email Monday morning, didn't realize that I was included in that email. I followed up with Elaine and Karen to say, are you sure that this is expense in the right area, this is booked, and this is something that I need to fix in my budget, or is just this something that's put there as a placeholder? And through research, through investigation, throughout the course of the year, determined that, no, the liability needs to be booked to this one. And it needs to be booked to the people that are under your budget, Marzac, not under just general medical insurance or just general Social Security. So that's where personally mine came from.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, Dr. Marzak, this
Yes, sir.
concerns me.
Yes, sir.
That up until 2 or 3 days before our budget changes.
Yes, sir.
That we're still finding mistakes.
Yes, sir.
I'm sick and tired of all these financial mistakes. And you know, we have asked all throughout the year that we'll go back and double check this stuff.
Yes.
Let's check it. And then here it is, 2 or 3 days prior to having another audit finding.
Yes, sir.
That we still haven't double checked stuff. And so if this doesn't pass tonight, you're saying that we're going to have another audit finding.
If the auditors look to this area, then yes, we will have an audit finding, because these are areas of the 100 to 299s that have gone over budget by a small amount. And it's just a small amount. It's not that much money. And we
Well-
can transfer money to cover those amounts. We have the money in the budget.
One of them's 880,000.
That's the 71-100 line. That's different. I'm talking about personally my lines alone. And the other one, as Amanda can talk about, is revenue that's coming in that we can expense.
We had to wait on the June rent payment and the check and all that to get cleared.
Well,
to get
that's
posted.
the parallel.
Right.
I mean, I'm not happy with that, but I can understand it more than I can this other.
Does the rent change? I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt, but does the rent change each month? What they
No.
pay us?
No, but they pay us each month.
Okay, so you knew though that was going to be coming in. That was anticipated rent. It's
Right.
not like 1 month it's 1,000, 1 month it's 500, is what you're telling me, right?
Right, but it has to be dumped in a revenue line first. And then
Right.
moved to an expenditure line.
But why would you not have expected that was going to happen on Monday for our board meeting?
I don't know that we can do a budget amendment if the money's not there, though. I mean, it has to go into a revenue line, and Karen May can correct me if I'm wrong, and then go into the expenditure line.
Sorry, my light's on, I didn't know it was,
Sorry.
but, but how can you close the books when you're expecting revenue and you know it's gonna come? I mean, it's what's coming.
Same
I
way
mean,
they do with,
I
I
mean,
think, things
you
that hit
can't
in
wait
July.
until 2 days before the year is over. I'm just saying, I think that's an anticipation you could have and know. Right?
Right.
I mean, we're gonna close the books and this revenue's gotta come, should be included already.
Right, and I mean, I'll take the blame for that. This is the first year we've had to do a budget amendment. So as far as the way they work and all of that, I did take this yesterday to Elaine. She said she couldn't do it, and then this morning she told me that she could do it. She had to find exactly where it was posted to. And then as far as the reimbursement back for the $25 on subs, that check come to us in September. I had no knowledge that it come to us, and she had to hunt down the check to make sure that it had hit that revenue line. And then as far as the fees to cover those subs, we were working to try to find money to cover those substitute fees. And it was just a matter of finding that and a time issue.
Sorry, Mr. Dudley.
Okay, back to our original question. Was it posted for the special call meeting or not?
Was what posted for the special called meeting?
That it was going to be on the agenda.
What we had on there was, if I go back to what I put on this morning, we talked about the 71-100 line, and we talked about posting, what I put on there yesterday, talked about posting for the 71-52 and 71-53 with the 72-310 and 72-320 budgets. That's what I put a placeholder on there for, as per what Jake told me to do Monday night. I put that on there yesterday.
So the reimbursement is
The reimbursement from the state was on there, yeah.
Right.
That's what I put on there. And the other one, because I knew Elaine was investigating it, and it was probably going to come back that, yes, it needed to be fixed. So I put placeholders for both of those on there.
Just for your items, though.
For the 71-100 item,
Can
yes.
you please specify with regards to the budget amendments that are listed? I mean,
Sure.
You're talking about 71-100, and it's listed as 71-51, 71-52, 71-53,
The ones-
71-54.
Yes, ma'am. So the ones that I put placeholders on were for 71-52 and 71-53 were the ones that I put placeholders on.
Okay. But the other two were not listed.
No, ma'am, I did not put placeholders on for
Yesterday.
those. Yesterday, I did not, no, ma'am.
Okay. When were they added?
Today?
Today.
Today.
Okay. Let's go ahead. I do. I mean, I do want to make sure that we're legal on this. I think that it's not going to do us any good to correct audit findings if we're not being fully transparent. So go ahead and give him a call.
It's a good idea to call Jake, because I believe that you cannot add anything to a special called meeting. I think that's the
We can
rule.
only discuss what's on the special call meeting agenda that's posted.
Mr. Dudley?
Well, I want to make sure that we're in compliance with the special call meeting notice. And then also I want transparency. I don't see that the public could raise, I mean, probably not a big issue, but I want transparency to be evident, that we're not trying to add something and hide it from the public.
Completely understandable. Thank you.
Let's take a break. Thanks. I was just gonna call him on the phone, but since he is our attorney, I was probably gonna not do it in public. I just was wondering. Right. That, we can probably conference you in if you want to be on the call, but.
No, it's fine, I just didn't know if y'all were gonna be gone for a minute, that's fine.
Yes.
Hi, Joanna.
Hey, Joanna. I'm getting rid of some of this, so I can go back.
Ma'am. Sure. Oh, gotcha. Sure. Is that better? That is perfect. Thank you. Well, you're welcome, sir. She's trying to contact the gentleman with the phone. Yeah, sorry, I'm just waiting on her.
Go ahead and get started with the specially called, and if Ms. Martin's able to join in, we can add her. Ms. Kinzer, I'll turn it over to you for a roll call.
Ms. Parker,
Here.
Ms. Martin, hopefully joining us, Mr. Pennings. Mr. Moore is absent, Mr. Atkinson is absent, Mr. Bates is absent, Mr. Beaver. Ms. Powers is absent, Ms. Morency. Mr. Dudley.
Thank you, Ms. Kinzer. Next, I think we probably need to adopt the agenda. Do we have a motion to adopt the agenda? Motion by Mr. Dudley, second by Mr. Pennings. Any discussion? I will say I will not vote to adopt this agenda because I thought that we were just going to be covering the BEP. And I don't know what these other ones are. When I looked at it this morning, these other things were not listed as being budget amendments. Reimbursement and revenue from parallel, and then to cover parallel fees for substitute teachers.
I can speak to that. The revenues were for rent. They rent from, well, for this year, it would have been August through June.
That's not the point. The point is that we were supposed to have budget amendments in for the only thing that we disclose, and specially called meetings are pretty specific in what we can have, and we only represented to the public that we were going to take up the difference between BEP. So I don't understand why we're adding these things on here when we didn't disclose that to the public.
So what we have, completely understand where you're coming from, completely understand. And that was one of the reasons why I kind of uploaded the rationale as Jake Wollover and I talked about, and we uploaded that rationale as soon as we could. These are other things that popped up that we discovered that need to be cleaned up before June 30th, and lucky we can get that into the county commission before tomorrow at 4:30 so that we don't incur audit findings. For example, the one that I have, the 7152 and 7153, These were things that were found out last week, and through research, discovered that, yes, those were actually overages as of yesterday afternoon. So, and what it came out to be is liability charges, and then adjusting the salaries for Shirley Johnson and for Kim Doddridge. And if we don't get those fixed, then they will be audit findings, and we still have time to get them fixed. So, but completely understand your position.
I just don't, I mean, I wish Jake was here in all honesty, because I don't think that this is what we represented to the public that we
Okay.
were going to be taking up.
Okay.
And I actually probably would like a legal opinion on that before we go forward.
Okay.
So we'll take a break and I'll give him a call.
Okay.
Mr. Dudley?
What's the differences between today and last week? I mean, we had, I done 17, 18 budget amendments Monday evening.
Yes, sir.
And why were these not found earlier?
So for mine, I was included in an email, and until I got back and started checking my email Monday morning, didn't realize that I was included in that email. I followed up with Elaine and Karen to say, are you sure that this is expense in the right area, this is booked, and this is something that I need to fix in my budget, or is just this something that's put there as a placeholder? And through research, through investigation, throughout the course of the year, determined that, no, the liability needs to be booked to this one. And it needs to be booked to the people that are under your budget, Marzak, not under just general medical insurance or just general Social Security. So that's where personally mine came from.
Well, I mean, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, Dr. Marzak,
Yes,
this
sir.
concerns me.
Yes, sir.
That up until 2 or 3 days before our budget changes.
Yes, sir.
That we're still finding mistakes.
Yes, sir.
I'm sick and tired of all these financial mistakes. And you know, we have asked all throughout the year that we go back and double check this stuff.
Yes.
Let's check it. And then here it is, 2 or 3 days prior to having another audit finding
Yes, sir.
that we still haven't double checked stuff. And so if this doesn't pass tonight, you're saying that we're gonna have another audit finding.
If the auditors look to this area, then yes, we will have an audit finding, because these are areas of the 100 to 299s that have gone over budget by a small amount. And it's just a small amount. It's not that much money. And we
Well-
can transfer money to cover those amounts. We have the money in the budget.
One of them's 880,000, 884.
That's the 71-100 line. That's different. I'm talking about personally my lines alone. And the other one, as Amanda can talk about, is revenue that's coming in that we can expense.
We had to wait on the June rent payment and the check and all that to get cleared.
Well,
to get
that's
posted.
the parallel.
Right.
I mean, I'm not happy with that, but I can understand it more than I can this other.
Does the rent change? I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt, but does the rent change each month? What they
No.
pay us?
No, but they pay us each month.
Okay, so you knew though that was going to be coming in. That was anticipated rent. It's
Right.
not like 1 month it's 1,000, 1 month it's 500, is what you're telling me, right?
Right, but it has to be dumped in a revenue line first. And then
Right.
moved to an expenditure line.
But why would you not have expected that was going to happen on Monday for our board meeting?
I don't know that we can do a budget amendment if the money's not there, though. I mean, it has to go into a revenue line.
Mhm.
Karen May can correct me if I'm wrong, and then go into the expenditure line.
Sorry, my light's on, I didn't know it was,
Sorry.
but but how can you close the books when you're expecting revenue and you know it's gonna come? I mean, it's what's coming.
Same
I
way
mean,
they do with,
I
I
mean,
think, things
you
that get
can't
in
wait
July.
until 2 days before the year is over. I'm just saying, I think that's an anticipation you could have and know. Right?
Right.
I mean, we're gonna close the books and this revenue's gotta come, should be included already.
Right, and I mean, I'll take the blame for that. This is the first year we've had to do a budget amendment. So as far as the way they work and all of that, I did take this yesterday to Elaine. She said she couldn't do it, and then this morning she told me that she could do it. She had to find exactly where it was posted to. And then as far as the reimbursement back for the $25 on subs, that check come to us in September. I had no knowledge that it come to us, and she had to hunt down the check to make sure that it had hit that revenue line. And then as far as the fees to cover those subs, we were working to try to find money to cover those substitute fees. And it was just a matter of finding that and a time issue.
Sorry, Mr. Dudley.
Okay, back to our original question. Was it posted for the special call meeting or not?
Was what posted for the special called meeting?
That it was going to be on the agenda.
What we had on there was, if I go back to what I put on this morning, we talked about the 71-100 line, and we talked about posting, what I put on there yesterday, talked about posting for the 71-52 and 71-53 with the 72-310 and 72-320 budgets. That's what I put a placeholder on there for, as per what Jake told me to do Monday night. I put that on there yesterday.
So the reimbursement is
The reimbursement from the state was on there, yeah.
Right.
That's what I put on there. And the other one, because I knew Elaine was investigating it, and was probably going to come back that, yes, it needed to be fixed. So I put placeholders for both of those on there.
Just for your items, though.
For the 71-100 item,
Can
yes.
you please specify with regards to the budget amendments that are listed? I mean,
Sure.
You're talking about 71-100, and it's listed as 71-51, 71-52, 71-53,
The ones-
71-54.
Yes, ma'am. So the ones that I put placeholders on were for 71-52 and 71-53 were the ones that I put placeholders on.
Okay. But the other two were not listed.
No, ma'am, I did not put placeholders on for
Yesterday.
those. Yesterday, I did not, no, ma'am.
Okay. When were they added?
Today? Today.
Okay. Let's go ahead. I do. I mean, I do want to make sure that we're legal on this. I think that it's not going to do us any good to correct audit findings if we're not being fully transparent. So go ahead and give him a call. Attorney
It's a
Klein.
good idea to call Jake because I believe that you cannot add anything to a special called meeting. I think that's the
We can
rule.
only discuss what's on the special called meeting agenda that's posted.
Mr. Dudley?
Well, I want to make sure that we're in compliance with the special call meeting notice. And then also I want transparency. I don't see that the public could raise, I mean, it's probably not a big issue, but I want transparency to be evident that we're not trying to add something and hide it from the public.
Completely understandable, thank you.
Let's take a break. Thanks.
Sheriff Parker? Yes, sir. Are you having to do like a attorney-client privilege, or are you just gonna call him on the phone?
I was just gonna call him on the phone, but since he is our attorney, I was probably gonna not do it in public.
I just was wondering.
Right. That, we can probably conference you in if you want to be on the call, but.
No, it's fine, I just didn't know if y'all were gonna be gone for a minute, that's fine.
Yes.
Good.
Hi, Joanna.
Hey, Joanna. I'm getting rid of some of this, so I can go back.
Ma'am. Sure.
If you go to the call to order section, that should be the one where you can vote. Number 1.
Yeah, I'm saying mine doesn't say open, you can just reflect my vote as yes,
All right.
it doesn't say open.
Thank you, Miss Martin. Shirley, if you'll just let us know if anybody still needs to vote. It's in. I'm sorry. Okay. That motion did pass, Ms. Shirley? All right. So we'll move on to budget amendments, section 3. And we'll be covering budget amendments 7152 and 7153. Do we have a motion regarding those?
Motion to approve.
All right, we have a motion by Ms. Morency, second by Mr. Pennings. And that's to approve 7152 and 53. Fifty-three.
52 and 53. Me?
Ms. Morency, and it was seconded by Mr. Pennings.
Please vote.
Are there any questions about those? If not, we're ready to vote.
Mine doesn't say it's open, so I'm gonna mark mine as used.
What's it under, Shirley?
It's still under.
Oh. It's under call to order?
Okay.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
My vote's yes, Shirley.
Mine is used also.
Yes, ma'am.
Mine was a nay, Shirley, not a yes.
Oh. Mr. Dudley would like his to be reflected as a no. Can you change that? Refresh it and see if it changes. That one. Not that one, but that one right there. And continue.
Still saying yes.
Good. Go. Scroll down. That was the motion to amend.
Yes.
I don't know where you're showing up at. Now that you say that. It's not showing up how we voted on ours.
Even though I changed it, when we locked it in, it would change his. It says no, but see, I've already put it in.
Okay,
It's just like when I put in, Miss Kansas and Miss Lawrence, it's still waiting to get, we will keep it on the same.
But I did go on and vote, though.
Oh, yeah, I see you did that. But see, even though it says waiting, I hit it and it will click in. We can watch it on this.
okay. Are you comfortable with that, Mr. Are you comfortable with that, Mr. Dudley, or you want us to do a voice vote on it, or?
As long as mine-
Gets
mine was
reflected.
counted as a nay.
Okay. All right.
I had talked to SBA about that.
Okay.
It's confusing.
Yes. Okay. Okay.
That was on the agenda.
All right. So we'll move on to the annual superintendent evaluation. Do we need it approved?
Yes, ma'am. Has to be voted on.
Okay.
Because once it's voted on, then you and I have to sign it.
Okay. Mr. Dudley.
At what point will the public, will this be put on an agenda for the public to see? I think the purpose or the reasoning behind the state's rules regarding this was so that the public could be informed. And I don't know that doing it at a special called meeting fully, especially one that was not widely publicized. I think the full intent was for the public to be able to attend when we were going to discuss the superintendent's evaluation.
Ms. Kinzer?
I thought that the other night that we said that we, as long as we got it done before the end of the month, which we did,
Yes.
that it could be on the July board agenda. And I know it's public now, but I'm like him, special called are not things that the public really maybe knows that it's pretty important document. So I would, I can understand you need approval for signatures and so forth, but I would hope any discussion or anything that would be on the board agenda in July.
I will say that when we spoke with Jake a minute ago, he indicated that based on the conversation that Dr. Marzak and I had with him after the meeting on Monday about what was going to go on the specially called meeting, he did not think it was going to be on the specially called meeting. It's been, I will say I don't feel like it's a complete document. The last time that we did this, we had individual scores from every member, and we don't have that in this document. So before I approve it, I really would like to have a chance to be able to review that, and I also feel like the issues that Mr. Dudley and Ms. Kinzer raised as far as being able to have a chance for the public to view it at a regularly called meeting. It wasn't my intention that it was pulled from the June meeting, but obviously I understand that it wasn't a complete document at that point, so I will probably be voting no as well.
Well, Monday evening, I asked what our special call meeting was going to be about and if it was going to cover the evaluation. And then I was under the understanding that we were going to move that into the July meeting. And I think the members of our public, our employees, deserve the right to be here if we're going to be discussing evaluation. Now, they may have all been submitted and just needing signatures. As long as we're going to bring it back up next month and say, now we're going to discuss what the evaluation revealed. And then.
And we can certainly put it back on the July meeting, but we can certainly do that, Mr. Dudley, regardless of how this vote comes. I think, Dr. Marzak. Ms. Kinzer?
I agree with you. Last year, we got to see each board member's individual printout. It was kind of hard to read in a way, but at the end of each one, it had the comments and all. And it was the first time I had ever done it, so that was really good for me to be able to view those things. And obviously, looking at it today, I don't know what the average score is. I don't know whether it's in comparison to last year. I think that's something we would have to consider as to, if things have gone a different way. Those are things we would need to discuss as a board, I would think, at a board meeting.
On page 17, the accumulated and average score of all the board members for the self-rating came out to be a 3 out of 5. And on page 23, the keys progress also came out to be a 3 out of 5. And you can see the areas that were charted in order to determine each of the keys. So the average overall composite between what the board member scored and what the key scored was a 3 out of 5.
I haven't put a pencil to it, but there wasn't but maybe 1 4 that was in all of the scores that we saw on there. So how could it average out to a 3?
When I averaged it in Excel, it came out to be a 3 out of 5. And I can share the individual scores. That's not a problem at all.
No,
And in the Excel file.
I'm just saying, looking at as we go down the scores.
Yes, ma'am.
And you put the average score in each column. Those are average scores.
And I can pull it up right now
No,
if you'd
I
like
mean,
to see it.
It's right here for us to see.
Okay.
And looking at those, going down the scores.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. I don't think there's but 1 4 in all of that. Am I mistaken? So how could it average a 3 when you have a lot of 2s? I'm not a mathematician, but I think you would have to have some heavy on the other side to average it out like that. See, I'm looking at one here under standard number 7. There's only 2 3s and 5 2s. So I don't see, and then here is well, actually more than that going down. So I don't see how it could average a 3 if there's not but 1 4 in all of these that I'm looking at. I see 1 4 under collaboration, but other than that it's all 3s and 2s. Actually, probably about an equal number.
Okay.
I mean,
Mr. Pennings?
Dr. Marzak, has every board member turned in their
Yes, sir, they have.
evaluation? When did you get them all in a timely manner? Or?
The last one was from Miss Martin on Monday at about 2:40 in the afternoon. That was the last one,
Thank you.
which is why I wasn't able to get it on the Monday board agenda in time.
Going forward, though, we had a conversation with Mr. Williver, with our attorney. While obviously the intent is for every board member to be able to complete their evaluation, we really can't force that. I don't know that that's something that it states in when we run for office that, we're going to complete this evaluation. Obviously, based on Dr. Marzak's contract, that's something that we need to do. But, Mr. Williver felt like if it was going to be reported, it really needed to be reported at our June board meeting with all the people who had responded in a timely manner. And so hopefully going forward, that will be how it's handled henceforth. Ms. Kinzer?
I've just done a little count, just looking at them, and there's a 4, there's about 33, 34 3s, and 19 or 20 2s. So you can average out to be 3.
When you take, there are 102 total scores. When you take those 102 total scores and you divide by, the final composite score, whole score, came out to be a 3 out of 5. And I'll share the data with you, with all the individual board members.
Any other questions about the motion
Here we go.
to prove it? Yes, Ms. Martin?
Dr. Marzak, you did say Monday night if we need what time I turn mine in, and the day that I turn mine in. I did speak with Chair Parker about the fact that Monday I did not come to the board meeting because I was in the hospital.
Yeah.
The other 2 days I was in Cleveland, which gives no excuse, but my time and date on turning that evaluation in has nothing to do with the average that Ms. Steve was talking about at this time. So I just want to make sure that we're not talking about 2 different things. Mine doesn't have anything to do with that.
Agreed.
So,
Dr. Marzak?
hey Dave, can I have the screen, please? Behind us. What you see behind me are the scores pulled directly from the Google form and then added into the overall spreadsheet. So for example, you can see here 1A. These were all the scores that were logged by board members, and here's the overall whole average score as compared to what each of the individual board members rated. So as I scroll through, these in the yellow bar match up what is here in the overall document.
Well, it helps to see that because they're fives, they're fours.
Yes, ma'am.
Everywhere, and all we were seeing is an average
Yes, ma'am.
composite of each one.
Yes.
That's why we need to see all that.
Sure, not a problem.
I would also say that I think the instruction said that if you gave a 1 or you gave a 5, you were supposed to justify your explanation.
Yes, ma'am, it did.
So, board members, when they get this, may want to look through, and if they gave 5s or 1s, make sure that they did provide an explanation, because I don't think it's helpful to Dr. Marzak if he doesn't have that information, one way or the other. But if you can get that to us, then maybe we can have a chance to review that before the July meeting.
Would you guys just like me to send you this raw Excel file that has the name when it was submitted and then the totals? Is everybody okay with that? Okay, I can send it right now.
Do we have any questions on the motion itself? Ms. Shirley? That's still what the motion is, at this point. I think Mr. Penning said. Was there not a motion? Mr. Pennings made the motion. No, I'm so sorry. Okay. So we don't have a motion. Does anyone want to make a motion? All right. Ms. Martin, do you want to make the motion?
No, ma'am, I don't.
All right. So,
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion that we bring this up again in July.
Mr. Dudley's made a motion that we review the superintendent's evaluation at the July board meeting. Do we have a second? Second. Second by Ms. Kinzer. Any discussion? All right. Seeing no other lights, we're ready to vote.
Is that still gonna be under call to order, or is it gonna be under?
It's under the annual superintendent's evaluation, Ms. Shirley said.
See, my thing only says budget documents, capital outlay, and ground call to order.
That's the work session documents, I think, that you're looking at, not the specially called. Ms. Kinzer seconded. Yes, ma'am.
Shirley, mark mine as yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I've added all those up, and that's what comes on average.
2.8, that's what I had.
2.8.
I thought it was around, right at 2.7.
So that's rounded to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you know, we round up, last year we had a percentage point.
All right,
Yeah.
that did pass. All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So, Mike.
Motion by Mr. Dudley, second by Mr. Pennings. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. We are adjourned. We are adjourned for the specially called meeting. Does anyone want to take a break, or you want to go right into budget? We'll go right into the budget.
Okay, so over the last 2 weeks, in getting back our budget from the county commission, one of the things the board tasked me with doing was contacting all the board members. Ms. Parker talked to me about that, and getting your input. So what you see uploaded to the agenda is the information that I got back from certain people. On the right-hand side, in addition to on the left-hand side, we've modified the budget impact summary to kind of cover the things that we currently see as a priority and things that need to be funded in the district. Okay? So Dave, can I have the projector again, please? So what we've tried to do is working through the strategic plan and also working through the vision of the school district, because Ms. Parker's exactly right. We need to be developing a budget that's in line with preparing children for life. So what we've tried to do is we've tried to bring back to you guys ideas and suggestions that we see are critical to preparing kids for life and also furthering the strategic plan. So what you see on the screen behind me in recommendations over to the right of the FY19 budget funding proposals are what we see as an executive team and what I see as a superintendent of schools as things critical to us moving forward. So reflecting back on the FY18 budget, some of the things that we did that Mr. Bates talked about the other night and a couple other board members have mentioned it at previous times were we have some previous contract commitments. So one of the things that we're recommending doing that I've talked to Ms. Gagliano about is not underfunding the 71-100 line again for the second year in a row. We need to bring that number back up to where it was because this year, which you guys just approved a budget amendment, we thought we were going to get enough growth money to cover the underage of the 71-100 line, and we actually didn't. We actually came in $300,000 short, and so that's why we needed to do a budget amendment to pull some money from some other areas. We only got about $500,000. So we have a proposal in here to fix that. So when we look at those previous contract commitments, basically what we're doing is we're looking at an off-the-bat cost of $1,338,413. We were notified last week that there has been a change in the law, and now employees every 5 years have to be fingerprinted. But unfortunately, the state's not going to give you any money to do that. So we had to add that to the budget at a cost of about $32,000 for next year. We have the cost of parallel fees at $150,000. In analyzing our substitute teacher budgets and working with Dr. Woodard and looking throughout the entire year, he felt that we could bring the $400,000 cost down to $150,000 as long as we monitor it closely throughout the course of the year. Special ed budgets, with substitute budgets, we stayed at $21,413. The custodial stays the same at $200. The 71-100 line fix is at $500,000. Ms. Gagliano feels that that's a good number to put in there, a good roundabout number. And then Tommy Schuyler was actually able to work to reduce the cost for internet and phone next year from $376 down to $285. So we were able to bring some of those costs down. But still, off the bat, we're looking at a cost of $1,338,413. When we go down to the next critical area, that's where we're looking at compensation and benefits. This is stuff we really don't have a choice on. So we have the salary step increase at $675,449, the benefit step increase at $118,592, the retirement increase at $743,595, the health insurance increase at $579,016, and the dental insurance increase at $16,158. That right there is a cost total of $2,132,810 that has to be added to the budget for next year. We then work through initiatives and things that certain board members were talking about. And this will all build into the column at the bottom that I'll get into in a second. We have a recommendation to fund K through 2 resources for ELA and math at a cost of $232,457. We have the opening of the new schools, which will start January 2019, December 2018 in about 6 months. So those costs have stayed the same with the half-year principal and bookkeeper at $148,892, the Battle Creek supplies and materials at $400,000, and then also the 5 bus drivers, which is not for growth, but currently what we need now at $115,000. We have, for the keys expenditures for the RTI positions, We've dropped the number down, unfortunately, to the BEP amount that the state is giving us at $150,141. We're sticking with diploma year 2, staying at $300,000, and then finishing out Project Lead the Way supplies. This is the last year for Project Lead the Way supplies. There will be no more after this, unless we add additional schools, 4, 5, 6 years down the road, and that cost is $157,134. So when we take all of those things into account, we come down with a grand total of $5,273,845 left to fund for FY19. So far, the County Commission has approved raising revenue $2,850,166, and then Ms. Gagliano was able to work with Mr. Laconin for him to be comfortable to raise revenue an additional $710,832. So they feel comfortable that will pass the county budget committee and the county committee. That left us a difference to balance of $1,712,847 still left to go. What we did is we analyzed budgets. We looked at areas. Last year we cut $1.373 million out of the FY18 budget to kind of get us to where we were. Plus we had the underfunding of the 71-100 line. We had additional requests that were brought in the beginning of $1.758 million here in the red that we didn't see as critical to fund in this short budget year. And then what we did is we looked at the 2 areas we could possibly go to. The first one was adjustment to budget 72-310. We looked at some of the insurance costs, and Ms. Gagliano was comfortable of taking $100,000 out of some of the insurance costs in 72-310 and tightening that line up a little bit to contribute to the cause. And then we looked at the 71-100 budget line. So we looked at the freezing and also the right sizing of the district, beginning the right sizing plan with elementary, middle schools, and high schools. And we figured between the cost of those 2 things, we could gather $1,625,000 in revenue. So that would mean that we are sending a budget back to the county commission, $12,153 to the good, where we currently sit with the superintendent recommendations for the budget moving forward with FY19. So that's where we are.
No salary increase.
Other than keeping the benefits as they are at no cost to the employee and the step increases, no, ma'am, we couldn't fit it in anymore. We couldn't. We tried. We worked the numbers. We put this in. We took that in. We couldn't even get close. No, ma'am.
Well, the county's going to have a 2.5% for all of their employees.
Yes, ma'am.
And I was just, the analogy I have is they're going to pay their employees, some of them who haul things, pick up things on the, do all kinds of jobs for the county, and they're going to give them a 2.5% raise, and we've got bus drivers that pick up children, teachers who provide education for our, and classified staff who are so important to the whole educational system. I would have appreciated if you all had looked at a fixed rate, and I actually ran those figures. Ms. Gagliano gave me the figures for that.
Okay.
As to how much it would cost to even do a fix. Could I share that with you?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
All right,
please.
I did
Yeah.
y'all's in a color, so
Okay.
you know they're from me.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right, here. And I'm not advocating doing this, but I'm not advocating doing nothing.
Yeah. And then the other alternative, which if the board is amenable to, is adding in the 2%, rising that amount, and then sending that back to the county commission on July 19th.
Well, I think that's something we need to, as a board, consider, but
Yes, ma'am.
I think as a board, we need to consider doing something.
Yes, ma'am.
These are not figures that I came up with. They were provided through HR to Ms. Gagliano and then to me, and I did it with my calculator here, which, as you all know, I don't always calculate exactly right. But you can see how much it would cost for $100. I'm talking about a fixed raise would put $100 on each licensed employee's annual pay. It would carry over, yes. Not the good thing, and I'll be honest with everybody here, this is not what I would want to happen really, but it means that those with higher pay would only get that amount. It wouldn't be multiplied, for instance. Yes,
Yeah.
percentage-wise.
Well, it's kind of like what we did a couple years ago with the $1,340 raise.
It is.
Yes, ma'am.
And you would have the choice of whether you would give licensed maybe more than you gave classified. I give this to you as an alternative, as I said, and you all have indicated as well that you feel that our employees should get that 2% that they feel that the state has provided. And I know that they don't give us but 70%. And I note that it's down 70% because now we're a richer county. So we're going to have to pay more for when these things come down. You know, when your county is beginning to grow, and I mean, it's a good thing, but they would hope property taxes up, sales taxes up, and it would offset those things. So next year, we'll see a reduction in that as well. So I'm not making a proposal. I'd like to know what other board members think.
Well, I appreciate your work, but I can't vote for this proposal simply because the cost of everything has gone up. And if the county commissioners can see it in their heart to give all of their employees a raise, they should see it in their heart for us to give our employees a raise, because they are just as much entitled to it as the county employees. I mean, I don't know how much it is this year, but I've been saying this now for 10 years. They pay an astronomical amount to some outside company to go pick dead animals from the farmers up off the side of the road. Are dead animals or students and teachers more important? That's my question.
I don't know the answer to this question. Did the county give their employees a 3% raise last year, like we gave the teachers? Does anyone know?
Doug Laconin sent us that. I can look that up really quick.
I'm just wondering if last year they got a raise in 2%.
I can look that up really
Okay.
quick. He sent us an email. I asked him that question.
I just don't understand how they can see that we have $2 million more that we have to pay in health and step raises, and everything's gone up, and they still expect us to be the same as we were last year. It's impossible to do.
So for the 17-18 year, the county gave a 4% raise. In 16-17, they gave a 4%. In 15-16, they gave a zero. 14-15, it was a 3. 13-14, it was a 3. And 12-13, it was a 0.
So last year they got a 4% raise?
Yes, ma'am.
Last 2 years?
Yes, ma'am.
I think we asked them for it. That's what I think. I don't think they're being fair to, they handle the money. I don't think they're being fair to our employees, their employees, because they work for the county too.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, $100 raise or I don't, raise is really probably not the proper term. Raise, I mean, it's a one-time gift.
I would recommend doing it like around Christmas time. Do it a one-time gift as opposed to dividing it out.
But by the time,
Yes, ma'am.
it's $75 or somewhere in that neighborhood. I'm not going to insult the employees to say that I was only willing to stand up for you to get a $75 gift,
Yep.
knowing that the county has given their employees the kind of raises they're going to get plus what they got last year. So as I've stated several meetings, I'm not willing to accept what the county has recommended, micromanaging our budget, what they recommended, and you know, inflation. We're being hit from inflation, with inflation from all different corners. We're going to end up having to cut the programs. You know, you talking about adjustments. I mean, are we talking about possibly having to cut positions?
Yes, sir. Yes, right-sizing the district, beginning the plan to right-size the district. Yeah, bringing it close to BEP levels. Yes, sir.
So, you know, Murray County is not a poor county. You know, it just has been another election year, but we've got a large number on that commission that it doesn't matter if it's election year or not. they're never gonna vote for any kind of tax increase unless it's forced upon them. And the only way we can force that is just keep standing up to them and say, hey, you know, we're just not getting enough funding. And so that's my feelings.
Well, in several meetings this year, we've had people stand up here at the podium and say, you get paid for your job. You get paid for the job you do. Earn your money. Do what you're supposed to do to improve the schools. So let's say, let's earn our money. Let's send a budget to the commission that we truly believe we need to educate our children, and instead of falling and going backwards, continue moving ahead.
I want to thank all of you because I really felt like when I gave you this, you would see how somewhat ridiculous it was to spend, even if you gave $500,000 and $500 here, that's almost $1 million just to give them a token $500. You're saying to me what we've said all along, we want to pay our employees. But if we take this to the commission and they don't accept it, I don't want it to be that one thing we can take out. You understand? I'm saying, you put it to them, they're not going to get a raise unless you all did. It has to be number one up there in our budget, as important as everything else. That's the way to stick with it. If that's what we want, I'm willing to fight for it. But it can't be, well, this is our budget, we can do it with the revenues, but then if we give a teacher raise, we can't. So what does that say to them? Well, then I won't approve it, and then you just cut it out. I don't want to do that. I want it to be part of the budget, all-encompassing, if you understand what I mean here. Knowing how things kind of go sometimes.
How many positions are you looking at cutting? I mean, I understand that there are vacancies and we're not cutting teachers, but how many are we looking at over the?
We were looking at, and correct my numbers if I'm wrong, we were looking at freezing 11 potential positions and then cutting, right sizing, what's the number? I forgot again. 24 total, so 13, right sizing 13 positions across the district.
So, and you think that's as far down as we can go with that?
I recommend right sizing in phases, not just chopping it all out at once. I don't think that would be a prudent course of action. I would not recommend going lower than what we're recommending right now, because we debated on that. We talked about adjusting the 71-100 line higher and trying to squeeze some more things above in, and didn't feel comfortable going higher than what we were currently at. No, ma'am. I wouldn't recommend going higher than 1625. No, ma'am.
So when we go to the commission, we can say we've done everything we can as far as the number of teachers that we have?
Yes, ma'am.
We're right there where we're supposed to be?
Yes, ma'am. And we looked at lines. So we talked to Stan about, the natural gas line. Do you feel comfortable taking that down on your lower? And said, Dr. Marzak, I don't.
Yeah, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about right sizing.
Yeah, right sizing.
I'm talking about making sure that we have the right number of teachers for the right students and that we are educating our students.
Mm-hmm.
We are not over, the number in classes, but that we have the right number of teachers for our students that we have.
For this year, for phase one, personally, I would not recommend going higher than 1625. No, ma'am. It would begin to create a little bit more problems. We could, but I wouldn't recommend doing it.
Problems
such as class sizes larger than what people would expect. Going from a smaller size to all of a sudden a much larger size, whereas this one would be a moderately larger size. And then if we implemented phase two in the FY20 budget, you're already adjusted to that moderately larger size. A little bit larger size is not as much as a grief versus going from here to here and jumping that phase one step. We have to open 2 schools next year, and
Okay.
and remember,
That makes sense.
we're not going to get BEP money for those 2 schools till FY21, and we're going to have to hire a librarian, we're going to have to hire a school counselor, that money that's not going to come in that we can't transfer people over.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, that's, I was just wondering.
Great question. Thank you,
All
ma'am.
right.
Mr. Dudley.
Well, as I said, it's election year. At least if we keep sending it back, the county commission may have to answer as to why they're not willing to fund the school's budget. And, we as board members say, well, we were standing up for raises for our employees. We were not wanting to have to cut and lay off teachers, and we're standing up for what we think our budget needs to be. And, I'm willing, of course, somebody may feel different. I don't have any opposition, running this time, but I would have done it even if I'd had the same opposition running against me. I feel adamant that we have catered in or are thinking about catering in too much to the commission. I think too many of the commissioners are trying to micromanage our budget. One of the commissioners said that she didn't have any trust in this school board. Well, I got news for her. I don't have any trust in her statements either. So I'm going to stand firm.
Mr. Beaver.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I took, each line item and
Yes, sir.
looked at it all through here. We got 10, 21, 4%, 13%. And my question is we're seeing some of these line items, it's 136% over an increase.
Mm-hmm.
We got some, it's 200% over additional increase. And so my question is, have you really looked at each line item? And what we talked about last week before last, whenever it was freezing money.
Yes.
Or payroll and freezing hiring. And let's look at what we got here in our budget. And I don't see a lot of cut here when we got 200% increase and 15% increase and all that. I don't see anything that's been cut.
Now, remember, some of those budgets were to fix for FY19 what was not budgeted correctly for FY18. So it looks like the budget's going high because it's moving away from one area and moving into another area. But sitting down with the team and digging into everybody's individual budgets and looking at areas that could be cut even more, considering what we cut last year to make FY18 work, cutting even deeper into FY19 became problematic because we didn't want to go through the process of having to come in March and saying we need fund balance because we cut it and now we need it because we're kind of in a pickle now. So considering what we did last year with FY18 budget, going much deeper for FY19 became to be problematic. We do have 100,000 in 72,310. That's pretty much according to what's already been put in. And if you really look, some of the areas up in the gray, the webmaster stipends, they're currently already figured into the budget. But we don't see how we can keep that in there, which is why it's not over here in this other column over here, considering that where we're sitting with a $5.273 million deficit already. So all the work that we're doing is through this budget impact summary, budget balance document, with taking the FY19 budget into consideration. Because remember, that budget doc is a 100, how much is it, Ms. Gagliano, total? The FY19 budget doc, most recent, that's figuring in the $15 million in increases.
Is it the chart up there we have?
Yeah, oh, that's right. Yeah, the total budget is $115,177,848. We haven't amended that yet because amending that, coming here and it's a lot of work to amend that. So we've been amending this with the current figures that we have so that we don't have to keep amending the FY19 overall budget altogether. But a lot of those things that are currently in that budget, that was the original 115, most likely will be pulled out. And those numbers will drop, and those percentages will drop as well.
Okay, like, the account 72,310, Board of Education.
Yes, sir.
You know, we have other fringe benefits, 1020.
Yes, sir.
$1,020,000.
Yes, sir.
All right, and then down on the bottom says other charges. You know, went from 3,000 to 7,000, $4,000 increase. You know, here's unemployment compensation in this one particular line item.
Yes, sir.
160,000 went to 240 with $80,000 difference.
Yes, sir.
You know, I guess.
Why?
Yeah, why?
Gotcha. Not a problem. You want to, can you?
I didn't do that.
No, just explain employment, unemployment compensations and how that pulls out from there. What that line is for, if you could. Because you explained it to me earlier.
That's kind of hard to, one, it's kind of hard to budget for. On unemployment, you pay that quarterly. But you can't, it depends on if we lay off people, if we do freeze jobs, that sort of thing. It all depends on your number of people who are eligible to draw unemployment.
But this is under Board of Education.
Right, I don't,
Isn't that going into $100,000?
that's what I thought we reduced that.
Tonight.
So he's, yeah, so originally. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So it usually falls under the Board of Education budget because it's a system-wide thing.
Right, it's for the whole district, but
Okay.
we had 100,000, it was 100,000
It was
that we took.
160, and then we're at the end of the year, and based on what happened this year, we were able to move some of that money in FY18 to cover some of the teacher shortage. And then in FY19, we said, okay, well, since we were able to do that here, let's reduce this line item down to 60, I think.
I think I'll just say this. I think the problem that we have is we're looking at a document that, I understand it takes a while for y'all to update it, but we're not looking at the same things. I can't tell based on that one document what the impact is on this master. And I will tell you, there's no way I'm voting on this master until I see everything reflected in there.
One thing that's a little confusing, the worksheet that you have up there, somehow the wrong one got loaded to the board agenda, I think, because it doesn't have those details on it. So I went and,
Yeah, these are the things that we've been working on for the last 2.5 weeks. We worked on this as late as yesterday to kind of get to a point.
All I
Yeah.
was doing is looking for it, and what's there is not here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what you see in the board agenda document were basically the core basic, and then the team and I got together and decided what additional things could we put in, what additional things, where are we in order to get to an overall number. And basically my goal tonight was to get from you guys, considering calling each of you and asking what the budget priorities were, is moving forward in preparing for the county commission presentation, what do you see as critical to the budget, and what's that bottom line that we need to get to?
so it is common in this stage of the budget development to have your master. This was the one that you started with, and then what Dr. Marzak's trying to do is use the budget impact summary for the decision-making tool. And once the decision is made, then it will be folded into this, and you'll have a new master that will reflect your decisions. And then that's the document that would go to the county, and then you will highlight
Yep.
things in that. But possibly we could make this a little more clear for them of what we're thinking.
Because we don't have that.
No.
No.
You have this with the figures in the boxes and some of the figures under column E, but you don't have the complete added over, which comes up to be $5.273 million right here. I believe the one in the board agenda.
It's without all that.
It's not my turn, but I have an insurance question too, about old figures, new figures, same, unless, but go ahead.
Mr. Penny?
Well, I'm just going to fall back on what Mr. Bates said. and he didn't say the first part that I'm going to tell you, but years ago, and Tommy may remember when, they took pennies away from us and never gave them back. Last year, they took more money away from us. They vote to build 2 new schools.
We did that.
They volunteered $65 million to build 2 new schools. But if you want to operate them, we're not going to give you the money. Okay. About Homes for Humanity, we'll build you a new home, but unless you pay us for all money, we're not going to let you move in. Give me a break. Things go up every year. Insurance, workman's comp, they give their employees a raise. We're not supposed to give our employees a raise. I applaud Dr. Marzak and the staff for cutting monies out of the budget. Because I'll tell you what, I'm in favor of going back and handing them the same budget and say, fund it.
Ms. Kinzer?
Well, I have a question, but I want to put something to rest about those pennies. They took the pennies from us. We didn't give them to them. And I've heard a lot about the pennies. They took them from us. They're the revenue source. They took them from us. We didn't give them to them. So this board did not willingly give up the pennies. So I'd like for that to be overdone with, no more discussion. Now, I have a question, and this goes back to one of these that you all gave us.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the figure you've got for insurance on here, and I'm sure this is a typo because it says estimate 13 to 1.3, and I think it's supposed to be 3 to 1.3 because we found out insurance didn't go up as much as we thought.
It's 1.3 to 1.5.
Okay.
There's supposed to be a decimal in
But
there, yes, ma'am.
on a previous document, you said that, and I can't read it because I swear I'm
Here.
No, I know it.
It's okay.
Started to say I was elderly, but I'm not going to say it on the air here. It's the same figure.
Yes, ma'am.
After we saw that it went down, it's still 5, 7, 9, whatever you've got down here. So is that not incorrect? Or, I mean, I showed a savings of approximately $380,000.
No, there's just, it's a typo that there's a decimal point missing in the green.
Okay,
But the cost still for the health insurance increase is 579,016.
Even though on this previous one, you all had that it was going to be like 5% to.
The number is 579,016.
It's,
Yes,
no
ma'am.
matter that the interest did not go up as much, it's still going to be as much.
Yes, ma'am.
We
Yeah.
checked that insurance increase 2.5% for medical and 2%
Okay.
for dental, and we actually checked that 2 or 3 days ago against that, and I think we thought it was 1.3 to 1.5 because it increased up to 7% last year, so we thought that would be lower, but it's 2.5% for medical and 2% for dental.
I just know that on a previous one, we thought it was more.
Yeah.
But it's the same figure. Do you see what I'm saying?
I thought it was 3 and 3.4 for the annual. That's what's in our budget concepts. That's what you gave me.
At first, it was gonna be, and I think the memo
Well,
got
first we
sent
had
out.
higher than that.
3.4%, right, it was gonna be 3.4% for dental,
It's the
and
same
not any more than 3% for medical.
That's what I had in my document.
And
That's
then-
all the figures I've been using.
Yeah.
And then they changed that.
Oh, I don't know.
There should have been a memo sent, and I think it got sent out to everyone from the state about the actual figures.
Yeah, and the actual figure should be 579,016.
Ms. Morency?
I just want to make sure that we do this right this year. I
Yes,
feel
ma'am.
like last year, it was my first year here for a budget, and it was overwhelming. I remember somebody saying, let's just do the same budget. They want the same budget as we had the year before, the same amount. And I do believe that we okayed them taking the pennies from us. Yes, we did. And we said, okay, you can do it. We voted on it. And so they didn't take them. We gave it to them. They could have taken it anyway, from what I understand,
Yeah.
but we gave it to them. And I just want to make sure, and that's why I'd really like to have all of the numbers that we can look at all of the numbers,
Okay.
the ones that we don't have up there. Because I just want to make sure that when we get done with this, that at least I feel comfortable. Like I said, last year, I think that's why we're in the predicament that we're in. Because it got to the point where we're just like, yeah, just give it to them, and that's how I felt anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know if most of the board did, but I was tired. I was tired of and it was just like, and now looking back on it, I think we made a huge mistake. So I just want to make sure that what we present to them is the lowest we can go, but also be fair to our employees and to our kids, and give them what they need.
And that's why, down at the bottom, even though we've recommended to adjust the 71-100 line, on line 33, we still have an increase of $500,000 at the 71-100 line because we're still under. I mean, you guys just approved a budget amendment to move $800,000 to fix that. We need to bring that number back to as close to zero as we possibly can. So even if we right size, even if we freeze, we still have a recommendation of $500,000 that needs to be added to that line to make FY19 whole from FY18.
Okay.
Mr. Pennings.
I don't really see, I could be wrong, but I don't really see where we can do much more tonight. We need the staff to go back, take the suggestions that were made, cut what you have to cut, bring us a budget that you're comfortable with, that you say will work, and that includes at least a 2% raise for all employees.
So I'll just go ahead and just put this in here, and we can see the numbers. 1462, 148. So that means that our budget total items to fund goes to $6,735,993, and we still have, after our budget adjustments, a balance of $1,449,995. If you're comfortable with us developing a budget that has that $1,449,995 in there, and then us delivering that to the county commission to ask them to increase funding an additional $1.5 million, then we can develop that budget and have that to you as soon as possible.
Mr. Pennings.
I'm comfortable with you and the staff doing anything you have to do to give our teachers a raise, educate the children of Murray County the way they're supposed to be educated, take steps forward, not backwards.
Okay.
And that is your decision how we do that. But that's my recommendation.
Yes, sir.
Teachers get a raise, do what you have to do to keep our education moving forward and bring that budget to us. And if that's what you say, look, this is exactly what we need, I don't care what the county commission says.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Morency.
Do we have any funds anywhere else? Central High School, are there any funds left from that,
For what?
from the building?
That the way I believe, and Stan, correct me if I'm wrong, is any leftover funds after construction rolls back into debt service with the county.
That is what Mr. Wolliver has advised me after checking the way they wrote the resolution.
How much is it?
At this point, we've not completed the project to see, so we'll have to come back to you with a final report of that. Hewlett Spencer's supposed to bring that next month.
Okay, I guess my question is, if that money goes back to the county, would that be something that they would give back to us to?
They would have to take a vote to do that. And remember also, that's one-time money.
Right, I understand that.
And right now, they're projecting at this point where they're at in the process. I mean, there's possibly several $100,000. It's less than $1 million, but several $100,000. The last number I saw was $900,000. And what again, they were going to come back to make sure you want to close the project at that amount to see. Because there was a list of things going in that weren't in the original project that Central High School had on a list, that these are things we would want to do if there were any savings, and the board would have to vote on that before we close the project. So that's what we're trying to bring back to you next month. But the way the thing is, the way Mr. Wolliver explained is once the project is closed, the resolution was written that all that money goes back into the debt service fund of the county.
Okay, but I would have to think, and maybe this is being really naive, that if that's money that they weren't counting on and we need that money in the school district and we've saved that money, that they would give us that money back.
It's a good question.
I mean, that would go a long ways towards that 1 million.
For one-time costs, we have the K through 2 materials. We have the supplies for Battle Creek. We have the Project Lead the Way supplies. Those are all one-time costs that would not be in FY20's budget. So that alone, that's 157, that's 557. It's about 780,000.
That would go a long way towards meeting that.
That one, it would cut that final out by half, 1.449.
And that's with the 2% raise?
Yes, ma'am, that's with the 2% raise. I went ahead and put the 2% raise in here because that's what many of you were talking about.
I'd like to look into that and see if there's some way that we can use that money, if they will.
Sorry.
That report's supposed to be ready to deliver to you, they're supposed to have to me by next Thursday, so we can post it on the agenda so we should have that next week.
Okay.
Mr. Dudley, I know you were trying to buzz in.
Well, if my opinion, if they're not willing to let us use the money on some one-time purchases, as Dr. Marzak pointed out, I'd like for us to spend the money at Central. Take the list that they have and fulfill some of those projects.
Mr. Pennings.
Keep in mind too, Dr. Marzak, how much is in the budget to pay the county to handle our funds?
What's the trustee? What did you have?
I think it's 200 and some odd thousand, wasn't it?
No, it's, I'm sorry. We had in FY 18, 714,586, and because it was gonna increase, we upped it to 950 for FY 19.
950,000?
Yeah.
So we're paying the county to
To
keep
handle
our
the
money,
money.
to keep our money.
For 2 months.
They've been harping for years when we had $5 and $7 million and $10 million in the fund balance. Oh, by the way, the county gets interest on that. Never given back to the schools. Never. So we pay them to handle our money. In past years, we've had to go to them and almost take them to court at the start of the year to get our money to pay our teachers. They make money off of us for being very careful with our money. I don't know, maybe we ought to give the teachers a 5% raise.
Catch up.
How many students do we have in K2 for next year?
Give me just a second to look that up.
While you're looking, also find out Project Lead the Way as well.
Didn't ask about Project Lead the Way. Isn't this the third year of that? And how many employees does that involve? What kind of expenses there? This is the third year of us.
Going into the third.
Look this up, KT. It's going to take me a little while to pull that. I don't have that with me. It's going to take me a little second to pull that up. But I will get to you once I have it up.
Okay.
Be going here.
Is it possible before the next board budget discussion that we can also have, when you're talking about right-sizing the district, I know I've had some people that have reached out to me and asked about that.
Okay.
And I want to know what we're signing off on. I don't think, what I would like to see is at each school, what we get in BEP money for each school. I thought it was interesting. I know Ms. Kinzer and I had the opportunity to go to the financial workshop that TSBA puts on, and there's a lot of things that it was really eye-opening. So I think we need it broken down by each school, what supplies are, what teachers are, how many students, how many teachers, how many extra teachers, class sizes. I mean, we need to know all that, because if we're paying for certain people to teach 4 kids, that's not public education, that's private schooling, or private tutoring, actually. And I think we need to look at some of that before we start just saying, we got to take this back to the county commission. Because I know those things exist in our county, and I'm not okay with that, especially when I know that there's K2 resources that we don't have and haven't had in almost a decade. And as far as the pennies go, one other thing that was said at that finance workshop the TSBA puts on is, he who has the gold makes the rules. That was the overarching theme that they provided. So as far as us giving pennies away or whatnot, I think it's important to remember he who has the gold makes the rule. And so last year, they wanted to fund 2 schools. We asked them to fund 3. They chose to fund 2. They chose to fund the top 2 that they said we wanted to fund. I'll be honest with you, they were my top 2, but that's what that's what they wanted to do. Again, they had the gold, they made the rule. We agreed to build those schools. We've agreed to basically fund those schools with our pennies. Because when I reached out to the budget chair and said, any chance we can get some of those pennies back? He said, that's going to debt service on those 2 schools in Spring Hill. So we wanted those schools. This board asked for those schools, and they have to fund them too. So I think it's important for us to remember where we were. The other thing that really was not accurately conveyed last year was that when the proposal was said, go back to the previous year's budget, there were a lot of things that we had already said, we're going to do parallel, or we're going to do GCA, or we're going to do certain things, and we just said, oh, we're going to pay it out of fund balance. That really was not what happened. That was not the instructions that Mr. Parliament or Dr. Marzak got. They just didn't cut. So, we did approve it, and I agree, and I'm guilty as anybody. But things like K2 resources, it was never my understanding that we were not gonna fund those. I don't know how many times Dr. Woodard met with teachers this year, or had staff meet with teachers and say, oh yeah, we're gonna have K2 resources. They're not gonna have K2 resources on August 1st. I can pretty much guarantee you of that. Because we're not gonna have a budget probably that's gonna be approved, that we're gonna have resources in the hands of teachers so that they can prepare. So we're already behind. We also know that per the audit findings, we were overpaying people last year. So I need to know that all that's cleaned up in here. I need to know that we're not going to have these issues, that, payroll is going to run pretty seamlessly this year. So if y'all can give us some affirmative statement or something. I mean, it's to the point now that I don't want to get those calls. I mean, I want to know that y'all are comfortable with the numbers that y'all have in here, and there's not going to be a budget amendment at the end of the year saying we have an underfunded account. And that, by the way, should have been done months earlier. So, in my opinion, you knew that existed months earlier. Maybe we didn't have the revenue at that point to move it around, but it sounds like we probably did to fund some of those things. If you're looking at unemployment and you're looking at some other things. But we need to know that. Can you give us an affirmative statement that all the payroll from this point forward, we're not going to be paying benefits for people that shouldn't be getting paid benefits? And
So going back to the approval last night, or the other night with Allaview. So we're building all of that information into Allaview, and Allaview talks with Skyward. It's currently talking with Skyward right now. So that's what we've been working on, is making sure that things are in the correct area, in the correct line, by the correct object code, so that when we do have an approved budget from the county commission and we hit the button that says transfer, it goes into the correct buckets in Skyward, and that's all kind of taken care of. That's the plan moving forward, and Allaview works with Skyward and other districts around the country.
So if it goes wrong, is that Allaview's fault and we can get out of that contract, or who's going to be responsible for that is what I'm asking.
Okay.
We put processes in place with payroll, both the person that's working in payroll as well as both of my staff that deal with licensed and classified. They are communicating, they're auditing the payroll records. Our payroll log has went way down as far as problems. Now we're just getting a lot of questions. So it's not necessarily an issue with their check, they just don't understand it. We're answering those calls and we're giving that customer service and we're meeting with them face to face. So the processes have been put in place. There's much more communication now between human resources and payroll. And we're going through each and every single change together and making sure that the changes get over. If there's an increase, if there's an employee that quits, all of those type audits are being done.
So that's from your standpoint, Ms. Gagliano. I guess I got to ask you, because it goes to the account numbers and all that. I mean, are you comfortable that all the account numbers that were used to prepare this budget are where they need to be, are accurate?
That development part was between the department directors and HR. So whatever data they agreed on was correct, that's their responsibility. I would like to double check all of that with reports out of Skyward, and I've gotten the medical and the dental report that I'm trying to work through because it doesn't have totals, so it's going to take a long time. But I'm working on that, and Amanda's sent me a staffing report yesterday, and we need to get together and work on that because the one that I have does not have totals either, and it will just take forever. And Skyward totals it for you, so we need that. But just I need to, before I can give you that answer, I need to go through each line. My report that I will use will be a mirror of the budget document you have, the master budget document. It'll say 71100, and then it'll have all the 116s and everybody under there and the total. All of the 162s, everybody under there and the total. And so that's my way of double checking that everything we have in there is correct. From, are they in the right accounts? Are the right people in there? And all of that. So, and I will just have to eyeball it by the description of the report because I don't know the people. But if I look at the numbers that we have in there and it's way off from the total I have, then I know that we have to look into that and figure it out together. And for the medical and dental, sort of the same thing. A list of each account number and who's in that account number and what medical plan they have. That comparison of the year we're in and next year, the difference between the two would give you your figure that you asked about in the budget impact summary, the exact figure.
I was just going to tag on to say what she just said about going through all of it. This is my 5th year to work on a budget. We have never developed our own payroll information before. So she mentioned just each department head has done that with HR. This would be our first time, so they're probably, we've done the best we could with the information we had to develop our own, but always that's come from the finance department to put those final payroll numbers in for a budget. So I would see why Ms. Gagliano would need to do that because we've never done that before. So again, we've tried to do that this year. Everybody kind of jump in and do their part to pick that up. But that's always the final stop with that has been in finance. Last year, Mr. Parliament did that. The year before that, Alice Perkins did that.
That's
the
not
2
what you
years.
told me.
Yeah, that's the way
That's
we've
not
all.
what
Yeah, that's
Mr.
the way we've
Parliament
always
told
done it.
me.
Yeah, that's the way we've always done it.
Because
before.
I've never done it this way either. I have had all of the information come to me from HR because HR knows who the people are, she knows what position they're in. The only thing I'm checking is the account number and the amount. That's been my role before. So.
Okay.
As far as what HR has done and worked with the department heads, we started this back in late February, early March. For instance, March 16th, I know Dr. Woodard, he wanted a list of all of his licensed employees, checked account numbers on those. I know on March 20th, Stan, same thing. Ms. Gagliano's been copied, when the reports go back and
There's
forth.
no account numbers on them. so
And
it
then
doesn't help me.
we checked account numbers. March 22nd, again, Woodard, we did work with Corey at Allaview with all of the account numbers, making sure that all the people were in the right places. So there's been checks throughout ever since March, all the way up until yesterday. Debbie and I were sitting down with licensed and making sure that everybody was in the right account numbers. So we've got those processes in place now. It's not something that we were, that we had done in the past, but I think it's a great check and balance to make sure everybody's in the right account number and being paid out of the right account number.
Well, I know that we had paid money to Skyward to have like a forensic analysis of our everything, the setup, all that kind of stuff. Are we complete with that? And I mean, because I don't want to hear that there are setup issues with people. I guess
Yeah.
is really where I'm coming from.
Agreed.
Because garbage in, garbage out was the information that we got the other day. Have we checked everything on that? Is Skyward comfortable with all of that information that's input at this point?
We had the Skyward Empowerment call, was it about a week and a half ago? Or was it 2 weeks ago?
That was to kick off our plan.
Yeah.
They are coming the week of July 10th, and they're going to start in the business office, in the finance office, and they're going to be in the HR division in August, because that worked better for them with all the hiring and whatnot. So they have done their off-site analysis we had to download data to them. Our IT department did that for us, and they looked at it from that point of view. And then they're going to come on site and visit with each of the functions and how they're using the software and what the problems are and all of that. And then after that, they're going to come back with a report and a recommendation.
So we don't have that before the budget process, though. Do we have everybody trained, though, in the way that they need to be trained at this point with Skyward?
That will be tweaked based on their recommendations.
Okay.
So, and the purpose of me with these reports is, like, for example, the report that you sent me yesterday, when I go down the 711-116 lines, there's no people's names, but there's a description of the position. And in the regular ed teacher line item, there's 10 vocational ed teachers and 1 special ed teacher. So to me, that's a red flag that in that account number, they don't belong there. So that's my purpose in checking.
Yeah, and so a double set of eyes, not only the eyes between Allaview and the way we're putting it in that's going to transfer over, but also the second set of eyes from Ms. Gagliano. And we're trying to work as a team to really go into a new process, to do something collaboratively to make sure that it's right on the front end. So we've had multiple conversations about, let's work together to try to get it to a point, because I'm like you. No more payroll issues.
If we have any more payroll issues? I mean,
It's my fault.
Okay.
It's my fault.
So you're going to accept
Yes, ma'am.
responsibility?
Yes, agreed. At this point,
You going to resign the next day?
at this,
I mean, really, are we to that point?
I mean, that's gonna, I wouldn't go so bold as to say that, because it's gonna be based on what's the situation that caused the payroll issue that we have to look at. Because, like Mr. Moore has explained, with his company, he even has payroll issues because sometimes people change benefits, sometimes they change deductions, and then it hits wrong or it doesn't hit right on that next payroll. So if we have deep database issues with concerns to payroll, then by all means, hold me accountable to that. That's my fault.
So deep database, but if one teacher doesn't get their check, then you're okay?
No. Everybody should get their check.
Okay.
The question is the check right according to the way you filled out your W-2? Is the check right, and your deductions and your medical? Because much like Amanda has said, some people have reached out to me. And then when they came and met with her face-to-face, they were like, oh, now I get it. Now I understand. And it really wasn't an issue with their paycheck. They didn't understand the deductions the way it was laid out and when deductions stopped. So they didn't get that. So once we explained it to them, then they were good.
So what about the people that get the notice from the insurance company that says you don't have insurance anymore because we haven't been taking it out, even though they signed up for it?
American Fidelity is the only one I know of.
Are you talking about American Fidelity, how we had that problem last year?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we had a lot of problems with American Fidelity, but I even heard it on some other insurance, I think even medical.
I really need to know who those people are because we haven't had anybody that we haven't paid their insurance.
Okay.
You know, we pay the state directly regardless. Now,
Right.
the deduction.
Now, I'm not saying that we didn't pay it. I'm just saying that we may not have taken the deduction out on them.
If there was a deduction, yeah, sometimes there's a lag in deductions depending on the billing and that sort of thing. But, I mean, if they will call us, then of course we'll try to fix it. But nobody's medical insurance has been dropped. I haven't had any calls about that. Nobody's dental insurance has been dropped. We did have an issue with American Fidelity. They're an outside vendor. There was some issues with that, and to my knowledge, those issues have been cleaned up.
All right. Did you find those numbers, Dr. Woodard?
Yes, thanks to Mr. Lang, we have 3,070 students in K through 2, and the averages in Project Lead the Way, Dr. Brown shows in 2017-18 was about 12.3, and for the upcoming school year, it's about 11.05. So, right.
Wait,
Speak up on that.
12.3?
I'm sorry. And those 18-19 numbers are not complete yet, based on enrollment and based on students' schedules.
Correct.
Those students who have not turned their request in yet, they haven't been scheduled in.
Schools are still building their master schedules also in now, so.
That would go up, I'm sure.
Correct.
And this is just our third year, so it's a growing program.
So what are the total numbers for Project Lead the Way?
I'm sorry.
Can you run those total numbers?
Total number of
Total number of kids
students.
in the
Project
pathway.
Lead the Way.
Project
How
Lead the
many
Way.
kids did Project Lead the Way last year?
Can we also know, like, the smallest class and the biggest class? Yeah. I mean, like, is there a class of 4 or 10 or? From last year, so. I'm sorry, I took the mic from you. Can I go ahead and make another statement? When you're talking about right sizing, that really concerns me because there's core subjects that's got, you know, scores. We've talked about the standards, we've talked about our scores, we're working on the keys, all of that. When you talk about right sizing, you've got to be really thoughtful about that. You've got to realize that you've got honors classes, you've got all kinds of things that overlap. You're trying to offer college level courses, you're trying to offer special ed courses. I would rather see us look at projects to cut rather than teachers, really. Because we're not always graded on our projects, but we are graded on how our teachers teach the standards.
Ms. Kenzo, I agree with you 100%. The whole purpose of this right sizing is really looking at where we have large numbers and gaps in terms of equity across the district. If we look at our district, we have some serious equity gaps in terms of the number of teachers in certain schools as compared to other schools when you look at enrollment. I'm just being honest. And I actually have a document I'm prepared for you all tonight I'd like to share with you regarding some of that. Stan, would you oblige me and pass this out? Sure. I think it's time for us to have this conversation tonight because there's been too much chatter about it outside the realm of what we all have had a chance to really discuss in this room together. And so, I really want to kind of set the record straight about what this is about. Obviously, the thing that we don't want to do is we don't want to cut teachers. We don't want to do that. We obviously don't want to do that. And so what I prepared for you tonight is I want you to examine this chart. This chart is basically a chart that shows you what teacher to pupil ratios look like in our district, okay? And when we talk about ratios, we're just saying a comparison of two quantities. What is the quantity of teachers compared to the quantity of students? This is not a graph that's showing you class size averages. One of the biggest mistakes that people make when they look at one of these graphs is they think, oh, wow, look at Central, that's 15 to 1, that's 15 kids in the class. That's not what that's saying. That's not telling you what class averages are. That's just saying that's how many teachers to student, okay? So you can see at Central, just using Central as an example, you have 88 teachers in that master schedule, and what you have is a ratio of about 15 to 1, okay? When we talk about right sizing, what we're saying is now we're going to turn the dial and increase that ratio to something about 22, and then we see that if we raise and turn the dial to about 22 to 1, what that does in terms of creating more class sizes, we can schedule tighter, and that would alleviate some positions if you had to cut. So if you would turn with me to page 2, on page 2, what we developed is a staffing formula, okay? So on the first page, what you saw were just ratios, teacher to pupil ratios. On page 2, here's where we kind of go through that process. So the first thing we did is we determined what the teacher to pupil ratio was for every school, and we did that by taking the current enrollment divided by the current number of teachers that are in that building. In step 2, we factored in the suggested teacher-to-pupil ratio, as that's the right-sizing piece. What would the suggested number be? Well, we right-sized it, okay? And then in step 3, we factored in special education classes, and then we also factored in ELL, teacher allotments, and things like that. So if you look at this list, first things first, in our elementary schools are already doing this. Our elementary schools are already staffed at 20 or 25 to 1. But in our middle schools and our high schools, they're not, okay? And so if you look at our middle schools and our high schools, you can see that we have some room where we could potentially look at, maybe making some cuts if we had to. So just using one school, for example, if you look at, I'll just use Columbia Central. So if we look at the first column here, okay, we see the enrollment is 1341. The teacher-pupil ratio, if we turn that dial from 15 to 22, that will be a teacher allotment of 61 teaching positions in that school, okay? Then we go to the next column and look at the number of SPED students. You got 235 SPED students, and that means that your allotment of teachers there will be 10, okay? Then you look at your ELL population. You got 47 there, and then you add your allotment for ELL teachers, which is 1.5. And so you add the 61 plus the 10 plus the 1.5. And so that would give you about 73 teachers in that school, that the school could operate with 73 teachers. That's a difference of 15 teaching positions from the 88 that they currently have. Okay, that's just an example of what the right sizing will look like. Does it mean you take away 15 positions? No. Okay, no. That's what Dr. Marzak is saying. He doesn't recommend doing this all in one fell swoop. So maybe you look at taking 3, or maybe you look at taking away 5, or maybe you look at doing this over time, so that you're operating in a more efficient manner, okay? And again, this is what we call the last day. I told you all several months ago that this is what the doomsday scenario will look like for our district, that we had to go to a model like this in order to find positions that we need to get the revenue. Now, where you're gonna find revenue in a district is in your personnel. That's what the money is. So if you gotta find $1.4 million, you have to find it in your personnel, and this is how you find it. You right size. So what you do is you turn the dial on your teacher-to-pupil ratios, and that's going to show you where the overages are in personnel, and then you have to make those hard decisions. This isn't something that we want to do. We don't want to lay off teachers. We don't want to begin to make cuts there, particularly if we're talking about trying to find ways to give raises. We don't also want to have to make teacher cuts. So, but this is the formula and the tool that we're going to have to use if we get to a situation where we absolutely cannot find this $1.4 million. You have to have a methodology, okay? We can't walk in blind and just say, go to this school and say, hey, you give me 2 or you give me 1. We have to have a methodology. And so what this is that methodology. Just so you know, this has been vetted. I sat down and met with some experts on this. I sat down and met with Ryan Latimer, who does this for 90,000 students in Metro Nashville Public Schools. And I said, Ryan, help me. Am I on the right track? Am I not? And he said this formula it's dead on. So, and again, will principals like this? No, I wouldn't either as a principal. But honestly, this is giving you a realistic look at the bare minimum for the schools in terms of running their schools on the bare minimum. Is this ideal? No, because what this does is it raises class sizes. So it's not ideal, but my job is just to kind of give you the numbers and paint the picture for you of where you can make the cuts if you had to. And then, of course, it gives you just the information you need to help make those hard decisions. So again, not something that we want to do, but again, this gives you an idea of the bare minimum that every school could use in terms of the number of teachers, and that is found in this total allotment column here. So,
Ms. Kinzer?
I hope that answers some questions and kind of clears up some of the concerns that you all may have about this, and I'd love to answer any questions that you have.
I don't have a question, I have a statement.
Yes, ma'am.
Elementary schools have grades. Okay, grades, so many grade.
Yes.
High schools, all the high schools have to offer CTE classes that have a maximum that's, what is it, 12, 15, something like that?
20 to 1 max.
20 to 1, okay. You're talking about, if you were to right size to this, and I'm not just talking about the big high schools, I'm talking about all of the high schools, as to what that would do. You would have strictly math, you would have strictly English, you wouldn't have honors courses, you couldn't have AP courses, you couldn't have those kind of rigor courses that take college level, and you really would hurt the special ed end of it as well, because you could only add that core curriculum. If we want to be a mediocre or less system, I wouldn't look at Nashville as to how they've right-sized, because their scores are lower than ours, okay? I'd rather look to somebody else that says we've got to have these people in the classroom here. Right sizing is really scary to me.
It is.
It is.
It
Yes,
is.
ma'am.
Next year, when we open 2 schools, we may have to look at this a little closer. But when you look at this and how you're talking about those many, and you're talking about laying off teachers, you're talking about transferring teachers. You're not talking about laying off teachers. You can't hire a brand-new teacher. If you've got an experienced teacher already there, you'd have to transfer.
You would.
Okay?
In some instances, yes.
I find this abhorrent. I would
It's
rather
tough.
cut programs.
It's tough.
I would rather cut programs that there is nobody testing them to see how they stack up with everybody in the state. I would rather have curriculum for these kids. I'd rather have materials for them to learn than to have programs that are just so great and they look good in every way. But that's not what we're here to do. We're here to educate these kids, and we're here to make them college ready or industry ready or technology, whatever. And so I found this unbelievable. And I know you don't want to do it, but I also know that I'm hearing across the board that it's kind of being done. So their teachers, every school is kind of losing some teachers because we're backing out of it.
Let me address that. I think it was the board meeting before last, we had discussed, or maybe at the last work session, we talked about the idea of having a hiring freeze. And so there were some vacancies that we did not fill in order to find 11 positions that would save revenue. And I believe that total cost savings to the district is somewhere around, if I'm not mistaken, $700,000. That's going to help with the FY19. And so that means that in some schools where we had a vacancy, we did not allow that principal to hire back for that position. We had to transfer some people, move some people around. It caused that kind of a shifting. But, we were doing that in order to find the savings that we needed. That was a part of the process. I'd like to address this again. I want to clear up a couple of things just so we're on the same page about this. One, this will be worst case scenario. Worst case scenario. Number two, these numbers are minimums. These are minimums. The minimum number of teachers needed based upon all the factors. When you factor in the teacher allotment, the SPED allotment, the ELL allotment, these would just be minimums. But even in the minimums, when you look at what some of the schools already have, there's room to make some adjustments in some of our schools. Is it ideal? No, it is not ideal. But again, my job in this process was just to show you where we had the excess in our district. And this is what I'm showing you. Yes, okay.
How can some schools have less than the minimum?
Give me an example of which school you're talking about. I may be able to help you out.
Whitthorne. Whitthorne, you have the minimum
45
at
plus
53 plus 53.5, and they have 46.
Yeah, and again, in
Mount
right,
Pleasant High School.
and in right sizing some of these, there are some schools that would probably need to gain some positions out of this.
That's what
if
I'm
we
saying.
if we truly turn the dial
You
right,
know.
there's some schools that need to gain. There's some schools that could give up some positions. There are some schools that we have that are just about right. So we really took some time to examine this. And again, is this ideal? No. But here's one of the things that we don't have in our district. We don't have a standard staffing formula. Okay. We don't have a standard staffing formula. And I'm just using Metro Net. I know it's a bigger district and it's different, but most districts have what they call a standard staffing formula. Excuse.
I'm sorry, that's y'all's job. I don't know how we're supposed to, be responsible for that.
I'm not making you responsible for that. I'm just saying it would be something that you would know about and would have approved that number. Whatever that number is, you would have to have approved it as a board member. I'll use Metro Nashville as an example. Here's what typically happens. In the spring, a principal would get a document, and on that document, you would have the number of teaching positions that you're allotted based upon your projected enrollment, and you would also have an idea of what your funding is going to be for the next year based upon enrollment, your per pupil, all that. And one of the things that would happen also is that you would have an idea of what your special ed population is going to be, which factors in also, just like we've done here, so you'll know what and how many spare teachers you're going to be assigned based upon the population that you have. Okay, and that forms what your total allotment is. You're going to build your master schedule based upon what you are allotted, based upon what you're given by the district, and that's when you begin to build your master schedule. Ideally, we could schedule tighter here, and that's why we did the master schedule review process with principals this spring. We could schedule a little tighter. In some of your larger districts, they're going to schedule closer to 30 to 35, state law, BP. I mean, they're going to go right to those laws. I don't want that here, and I know we all wouldn't want that either. And the harsh reality is that we have pretty good class sizes in this district, but we still don't have the achievement that we want to see. So let's just be honest. We have really good class sizes in this district, but we still don't see the achievement. So that means that we have a real issue to address in teacher quality, and that's why in our plan for year 2, we're really focusing on human capital development as the strategy for improving the teacher quality we have in our district. But again, going back to this, if we had to make cuts, my job simply was to show you where the maximums are, where we have excess in the district. And again, these are very tough conversations. We started these conversations with principals back in April, and they were tough conversations. But again, we do have room for some excess, and we also have to look at equity. We found several schools with larger enrollments that had fewer teachers, such as Brown and Baker. You know, if you look at the enrollment at Brown has 27 teachers, Baker has about 24. So there are 3 more teachers at Brown than there are at Baker. You know, there were just some things that we found like that we need to correct, and we can correct that through this process. We've already started doing some of that now and correcting some of the inequities that we have found. But again, I just want you just to clear it up. This is just showing you where the excess is in the district. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. And I've had individual conversations with several principals. There wasn't a lot of feedback collectively. I've had individual conversations with a number of school leaders about it. One, of course, you know, what I showed them was the whole list, so everyone could see what everybody had. I put that up on the projector screen. Everyone could see what everybody had, and so obviously there were some glaring differences. There were some differences in equity. What I'm hearing from individual principals that I've spoken with, they're more concerned about, I believe that we pay based upon the number of teachers, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct? We pay based on the number of teachers. And so some have worried about how this would impact their pay, and I understand that. So I understand where this really deeply impacts them because they're paid on the number of teachers. That was something I learned later. So that was one of the chief concerns, was how this impacts them in terms of pay. Many of them did understand. Many of them were keenly aware of what their numbers look like. I had several who said to me, I realize I'm over. I'm willing to give up a position. One person said to me, I know that I'm 2 or more positions over. They're keenly aware of this, and they know. So I have not seen a lot of pushback. As we went to the hiring freeze and went through that process, that created a little more angst. Obviously, during that process, we looked at some of our CTE programs, looked at programs that were not full, and we had to ask our leaders to make some real tough decisions. And so in some of those CTE programs, we decided that we had to cut some of those. And it was just because we don't have the numbers to support those programs. And with those programs, you have teacher costs, and you also have expensive equipment costs that go along with those. So that's something that we just had to do. And these are not easy conversations, and it's not easy to do. But again, I felt like we're in a situation now where we're hitting dire straits, and we had to make those tough decisions. And again, I don't want to be labeled as the bad guy for this. This is, again, just showing you all where the excess is in our school system, so that if you choose to make those tough cuts and decisions, this is there. It doesn't mean that we're going to. It just kind of shows you what is there. It just shows you the what. I think collectively, our team would come back to you and say, this is the how how we'd like to proceed or what we think is right. And we've also tried to involve principals in those decisions. And it's not been easy, but we have.
I definitely know that, always fall back on, what somebody's scope is. I know these numbers are your scope, and this type of task is definitely in your scope to give us the information on what we need. But I would be remiss if I didn't say that I understand the program may have to be cut, but CTE, of course, for me, is the place that I
Correct. Right.
and constantly get numbers given to me as to the importance of those programs and the importance of opportunities for students to have to be involved in CTE programs while in high school and then having those opportunities post-secondary, because we cannot neglect the observation that career-wise, those are huge opportunities for our students. So that's definitely not a place that I want to have us put at all. But I understand what you're saying. I understand
Correct.
what you're saying as far as partnering with things. I hope that we take a look at it again, and I hope that we continue to look at opportunities, because things like that, I definitely personally don't want us to have.
Correct. We did that where we had very, very small classes. When you have schools that have 6, 6, 8, and then when you look at spreading some of our CTE classes out, of course, across a 7-period day, we weren't filling sections very well. In my mind, and I've talked to principals about this. I think 12 is a reasonable number to create a course section, and if we don't have at least 12 sitting in there, again, I like small class sizes. I think it's great. I mean, kids get that individual attention that they need. It's great. You really want that in a core class where kids can really get that in core classes. But when we have CTE classes where, typically we should be putting those at 20 to 1 and we're not, it really makes it difficult. And just, for the record, I'm a huge CTE advocate, and you go look at Mayport High School. Mayport High School is probably one of the best in the state.
Supervisors for getting those students to the TCAT national competition and keeping our system, basically letting students and parents and families know that these are opportunities. So I
Correct.
appreciate your efforts in the CTE and Dr. Woodard.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. So,
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can I answer any other questions for board members? I know this is difficult.
I have a question. What
Yes,
do you
ma'am.
mean by working on the quality of teachers?
When I say teacher quality, I have a report that I'd like to show you all at some point where we look at the distribution of level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 teachers in our district. And when I say teacher quality, I mean moving up their effectiveness, improving the teacher effectiveness of teachers. That's a better way to say that, is improving teacher effectiveness. So
I'm sure you were in jest at a principal's meeting saying, I'm surprised you haven't fired 21 teachers, one for each tenured teacher, because just that statement alone would be part of some kind of suit. We're in one now on a tenured teacher. I can't imagine that you would tell principals to fire tenured teachers. Or tell them that you were going to show them how this summer.
I will answer for that. We have some good teachers in our system, and we have some who are at the bottom of the effectiveness scale. And if they're not performing, if we look at our test performance, we have some that need to improve their performance, so they have to go. Now, the state says that a teacher who is tenured, who does not have level 3, 4, or 5 performance for 2 consecutive years, can lose tenure. And so when you keep looking at performance and we're not getting the performance that we need, either we have to improve teacher performance and help them improve, or we do have to dismiss those individuals who are not performing. We can't keep them here. Now, I will say this, and I have said this to principals. One of the problems that we have is that if, when you have a vacancy, you're going to fill that vacancy with what? The best person that you can find. And that brings in a good quality person into our district, into our school system every year, okay? But if the people who are not effective just stay and hang around and keep doing the dance of the lemons, we move these ineffective people from school to school to school. And we're not removing ourselves.
You don't tenure them.
Well, the problem is they're already tenured and they're here. You know, that happened long before. But my thing is now we have to address underperformance now. And I'm not afraid to tackle that issue. And again, I'm not afraid to tackle that issue. And if they're tenured and they're not performing, my belief is they need to be dismissed if they're not performing. And that's what the state law says. If you're not performing, you know, I'm just being honest.
Are you all having this retreat with Chuck Cagle in order to show principals how they can justify firing tenured teachers?
It's not just about that. That's one of the things that will be discussed. Dismissal proceedings, documentation, how to address.
So you're not worried about the risk you have at planning and teaching principals how to fire tenured teachers?
No, I'm not sure that we'd be at risk for teaching them how to properly document and remove an employee that's not doing the job. Not at all. No, ma'am. Mm-mm.
Or even making that principal feel that they should every year fire a tenured teacher. We all know how difficult that is because we're still in litigation.
I don't make any bones about it. I'll be honest with you. I don't make any bones about it. You know, I'm going to say this. I think, again, if we keep circulating individuals who are not performing around our district, we're going to have the same issues that we've been having. They just go from place to place. We just keep moving them around because they're not tenured. Because they are tenured, and we're afraid to address some of the performance concerns, we have to do it. Okay, we have to do it. We have to address some of these performance concerns. And again, either we coach them up and make them successful, make them highly effective, or at some point we have to make the hard decision that they're harming the profession and hurting kids. And that's the tough conversation again. That's a tough conversation. And I expect instructional leaders to be able to have those hard conversations. I don't expect an instructional leader to just allow those individuals who are not performing to just let them hang around. I don't believe in that. That's just not my philosophy. I don't believe in it. And I'm expecting the instructional leaders in our district to be able to have the kind of hard conversations and to develop the expertise to be able to coach these people up to make them highly effective. Or if they can't do that, to have the skills also to remove these individuals if they're not being effective and they're not performing. And
I'm just appalled at the idea that all the principals in the central office are going to go to Nashville for a nice weekend and be paid a great deal of money for an great. He's probably the foremost expert. I know Chuck, and so I know, and he will understand why I say this, but to pay him to come and spend some time with you all to give you a legal definition of firing teachers, tenured teachers. That's part of this weekend, right?
There will be a discussion of a number of topics: climate and culture, teacher effectiveness, legalities, what are the rights of the principal under the law, so how to address employee issues. There'll be a number of issues that we discuss at this Leadership Institute. So, and also Chuck is giving us his time pro bono.
Well, that is good news.
Pro bono.
And I do respect him. I think he is one of the leading authorities in the state on education issues, but I do think it's a slippery slope. And I do think that when, as a system, we are making that not only available, but almost encouraging that to our principals, I think it's appalling.
Yes, ma'am. And I respect, you know, how you feel about this. I've been tasked with the job of trying to improve performance in this district. That's what you hired me to do. And it's going to take some time. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take some time. But the number one thing that improves performance for students is having a highly effective teacher in every classroom, period. And I know you all want your children and you want your grandchildren taught by a highly effective teacher. And that means that we have to provide the training and the necessary support to make sure that we have a highly effective teacher in every classroom, period. And we have to do that. But if you have people who refuse to grow, who are not going to do it, who get tenure and say, hey, I've got tenure now and I'm going to coast and just coast it out, and then they refuse to perform, then at some point we do have to address those performance issues. And that, again, becomes those hard conversations that we have to have at some point. I do not believe in letting a person continue to coast on the job because they've earned the tenure right. You don't coast, you keep going. This is about helping kids.
Talking like that happens to everybody. That is not the case. You can't make a generalization like that, that once they get tenure, they're gonna sit back and do that.
No, I said to those who do. Those who do, we have to address those who do. I didn't say all will. I said those who do, we have to address those individuals who do. Okay? That's all I'm saying, is that we have to have a vehicle to address underperformance in our district. Otherwise, I don't believe we'll see our county grow.
I appreciate what you're doing, and I understand, and Betty, you know that we do have some, just because they're tenured doesn't mean that teachers are doing their job. And I'm not saying,
Or central office.
Madam Chair, a point of order.
I'm sorry.
I think we have to recognize and have some decorum. Press your mic and you wait to be recognized before you speak. Keep this thing in order and quit, so it doesn't get to be a debate between two people.
I agree.
I think I probably need to recognize you then, Mr. Bennett. I think it's Ms. Morency's turn, but duly noted.
Okay. I think it's something that we have to look at. I know that in the business world, I don't care how long you've been there, if you haven't done your job, if you're not doing your job, you don't have a job. And I don't think that that you're saying that every tenured teacher is that, but I have to believe that throughout this district that we do have some. And I think that since our principals are responsible for hiring and firing, that they need to know how to do it, and they need to know all of the different things. I think it's a really smart thing.
Ms. Martin, did you? Oh, Mr. Beaver, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, I guess my question is, with the budget problems we're currently going through, why do you feel you need to go to Nashville instead of keeping it here in Murray County to have this treat?
My rationale for that was that sometimes it's just refreshing to go somewhere else. Lipscomb was very gracious. The Summer Leadership Institute will be at Lipscomb University. They were a gracious host, and it's refreshing to go somewhere else. And this was paid for out of federal funds, so it doesn't cost the district anything. It's paid for out of federal, and it's under our federal staff development money. And so this is going to be staff development. We also wanted to open up the Summer Leadership Institute so that our leaders can also mesh and get the chance to meet and fellowship with other leaders from other counties as well.
So there's going to be other counties involved in this?
So, yeah, we're planning to invite some leaders from other principals from other counties as well. So we're excited about the opportunity for them to learn and grow and meet colleagues, who are doing the same job in other counties and share experiences. Really excited about it. I think it's a unique opportunity. And again, we've done it so that it's cost effective to the school system.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Do you have those numbers yet? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Dr. Brown, if you come forward. You want the mic? Okay.
Some terrible sinus issues tonight.
You're on.
Okay. Now, what would you like to know?
Project Lead the Way, number of students.
All of them.
Mm-hmm, total.
Okay. Central High School. Now, these are for last year because still
Right.
for
Do
this
you have
next
the total
year.
for all of last year?
I do.
Okay.
You had the total average, but
I'm not looking for average, I'm looking for total students.
okay, for Central High School, they had 96, which was an average of 16 for the number of classes that they had with no dual enrollment. Cleoka Unit had, no, I have my glasses, but may I borrow your calculator a minute? There's only one that I didn't figure out. 22. 25, 9, 12, 22, and 4. And that's a total of 94. Thank
Thank you. So Caleoca unit had 94, which was an average of 15.67, and 3 of those 6 classes were dual enrollment classes. Hampshire Unit School had a total of 72, which was an average of 12, and there they had 2 dual enrollment courses. Mount Pleasant High School had 31 total, which was an average of 5.17, and 5 of the 6 classes were dual enrollment. Santa Fe Unit School had 56, which was an average of 9.33, and 5 of the 6 courses were dual enrollment. Spring Hill High School had 106 and had an average of 17.67, and all of those courses were dual enrollment. I will say that our ESSA mandates are a two-edged sword. They require that we have ready graduates, and to be ready graduates, if a student does not make at least a 21 on ACT, I just want to make sure I'm clear, I've got medicine going on here, 21 on the ACT, then they are required to have a certain number of early post-secondary experiences in order to be considered a ready graduate. In order to do that, dual enrollment is your best object or your best opportunity besides industry certifications. We have some really good situations set up with the TCATs and Columbia State in order to do those. That's where your dual enrollment courses are coming in. And unfortunately, those are going to be smaller in number, particularly in Project Lead the Way, because this is only the second year. You'll notice that Spring Hill High Schools is a little bit higher, but they were doing Project Lead the Way design, Engineer by Design, before we went into Project Lead the Way. So that's why theirs is a little more established, and you can see the difference. I mean, 106 students at an average of 17.67. That's tremendous, because like Dr. Woodard was sharing with you earlier, full is 20, maximum is 25. However, if the school, as a unit, any one school goes over 20, we're fined. So we want, there's a sweet spot there of anywhere from 18 to 20, but if we get close to 20, I'm getting nervous, because if we go over 20, and that would be 20.5, then that's going to push our average to 21, then we're going to be fined by the state for going over the average.
Okay, thanks.
Does that answer your questions?
It does answer my questions.
And we have level 1, 2, 3, and 4 courses. The higher you get up in the level 3 to 4, the lower your numbers are going to be, because those are your harder classes. We do not have one single textbook that is any less than a college level reading.
You have textbooks, though.
Oh, yeah, but
You have to pay for them.
classroom set.
Classroom set.
They don't go home.
They don't go home?
Yeah, no.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. We just can't afford that. They're very expensive.
Gotcha.
So, but we do have classroom sets, and it's very important for the students to learn how to use a textbook, but also how to know how to use an online textbook as well.
So they have access to it online?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Unless our edition that's been adopted is past a certain year, and then we don't have it, but because it's
Okay.
expensive.
Okay.
So,
Well, you're bringing up a lot of why I'm asking these questions is because for K2, they don't have textbooks. They don't have resources, and we're talking about 3,070 kids was the number that you gave me. We're talking about 455 kids. And we're talking about spending $232,000 on K2 resources. We're talking about spending $155,000, I think, or 157 for Project Lead the Way.
that's equipment. Right.
For equipment.
Yeah, all of Project Lead the Ways.
Right.
There are no textbooks for them. It's all online. There
Okay.
are no textbooks for Project Lead the Way. Just saying.
I'm just
saying.
when you're talking about equity, when you're talking about making sure that we're, providing resources to everybody, I think it's important that we look at that. That's K2, I just think is getting a little bit of a slap in the face with this current budget proposal. But maybe by the time that they hit third grade, they take those tests and they're prepared and they're ready to go and they score well on Key 1 and Key 2. And we just keep growing from there.
Sorry.
No, I appreciate it though. We put our money in the things that we value, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't put money into CTE and put money into Project Lead the Way, but we've invested a lot of money in Project Lead the Way, I think, for the last 2 years.
Right, this
And
is our last year.
the last year that we would be paying for it, but
And we are using a lot of federal money for the 18-19 school year to finish that up. Actually, more federal money than the money that's in this budget.
right,
So, and grants that I've written too.
that's good.
Yeah.
Thank you. One other thing on the RTI, we're not looking at funding that, is that correct? Any
Yeah,
RTI positions?
We are only to the BEP level that we've received.
Okay.
So we'll be receiving 150,141 in BEP, and then we'll have to decide how to dole that out best to get the best effectiveness. But it's not to the levels of what we funded in the past, at about $800,000. It isn't, which could impact some of that RTI movement that we've
Right.
had on keys 1, 2, and 3. It could impact that. It really could.
Well, next time we get together, it'd be helpful if what you're looking at up there is what's loaded into ours, because it's not the same.
Yes,
So I
ma'am.
couldn't see what we were I just wanted to make sure that we were going to be having RTI, because the way
Yes.
it looks like on ours, it looks like we're not funding anything, and I just wasn't sure if that was money that we're going to be giving back to the state.
No, ma'am.
If we weren't going to have RTI.
No.
I think we've probably maxed out where we can go with this budget process right now.
I have one question, if you wouldn't mind entertaining me. Your perspective on this, on diploma funding for year 2 at $300,000 only, and this is the reason why I asked this question. So you guys made the recommendation to spend $300,000 this year in order to get computers for next year. The lease is written in that once we order the computers, we cannot back out due to lack of funding. We have to come up with $300,000 next year, and the deadline is coming up for us to be able to order those computers before they rise in costs. I need to know from you guys, because at this point I've told Stan hold, because if the board hasn't told me that diploma is important and we're going to fund it for a second year, I don't want to incur a cost to the board of $300,000. That would be unfair, and it would be unwise to do that. So I need to get from you guys, is that an area that you want to continue to fund, or do we need to continue to hold? Because if that money's not spent by Friday, it's going to roll into fund balance. But the board's already made an obligation to spend that money, but I don't want to obligate you if that's an area that we're going to look to roll down to zero. My recommendation is to continue to move forward with diploma with at least $300,000 a year. If this stays in here in the yellow, this will be year 2. We'll have one more year, which would be in FY20, to fund it at least $300,000. But I need direction from a majority of the board on the current lease that I've told Stan to hold on, considering that it's a mandatory. The county wrote the MOU that says you have to fund it. Once you order the computers, you cannot back out. The county wrote the MOU that way.
I would just say with our current fund balance situation, I personally don't feel comfortable going forward with $300,000.
Well, the $300,000 was already budgeted based on the numbers that you received the other night.
Right.
So if you don't do it, if a majority of the board decides not to do it, then it goes from $62,800 to $362,800, because the money is still sitting there waiting to be spent. Because I didn't believe it was fiscally appropriate to send that in case year 2 wasn't going to be looked at being funded.
I personally think that we need to fund it.
Okay.
I think that's the direction that we want this district to go. And I know money's tight, but I think that we have to make small steps, and I think that that's the direction we need to go.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I think because of our current situation and our budget, and I think we need to take a very serious look at putting everything on hold right now.
Well, I'm in favor of budgeting it. I don't think it's fair to the ones that don't have them yet. And as far as putting everything on hold, I don't know, I may be just getting senile, but you either move forward in this life, because you can't stand still, you either move forward or you fall backwards, and I don't want us to fall backwards in this school district anymore.
I'd like to see us move forward as far as ordering them, but the way we distribute them, I'd like for us to look at our distribution method before they're handed out.
I think the distribution method really needs to be looked at, because looking at it, thinking in terms of Whitthorne, you've got some coming from Baker that have them, some coming from Brown, and so you've got a fifth grade when half of them have them, half of them don't. So I think there need to be something there so that I think to be kind of chaotic to try to teach them if you can't at least get those in the hands of. Maybe we should have, hindsight is always retrospect. Maybe we should have just really relied on 7 through 12 in the first place to initially, but we didn't. So I don't know that 300,000 will do it, but I think we probably need to go forward with it.
I will say that if we're talking about right-sizing the district with employees, I think now would also be a good time to look at right-sizing the district with regards to diploma. I think it's ridiculous that you're going to have teachers that taught all last year with diploma devices. Their fourth grade moves up to Whitthorne to a teacher that didn't teach last year with a diploma certified class, so she didn't teach that way. And the fourth grade teacher now has no devices in her school. So she's now got I think y'all use the word pedagogy or whatever. Pedagogy, there you go. So she's got to completely change how she teaches. So how is she going to be a quality teacher if she's completely changed how she teaches, but she has access to no devices? And how is that teacher that didn't teach last year with it, that may have been an effective teacher, how is she going to completely change, especially if everybody doesn't have devices? So until we can answer that and solve this for everybody, I have concerns. And I don't think that, it's almost July 1st, and I haven't seen anything from y'all that really would address that, even if we did go forward with this 300,000.
Well, and what we're going to be doing with the next wave of diploma is tying it closer into curriculum. So tying it closer into Ron's department, because technology needs to become seamless between what you're doing in the classroom. It's not an add-on. It accentuates the environment in the classroom. So we're going to be working closely with Ron's department and Ron's people to make sure that technology is seamlessly integrated as much as it possibly can in order to facilitate the learning in the classroom. Before it was a disconnect.
Sorry.
It wasn't part of curriculum. We're making it part of curriculum now.
So are we eliminating the digital officer position?
We're eliminating the digital officer and changing that over to a supervisor of instructional technology. That will be a position that will be paid less. They'll focus more on pedagogy. They'll focus more on software integration, and they'll work closer with the with the curriculum and instruction team to merge those two together versus two separate departments trying to work together. So we're changing that for year 2.
So that's not a position that we could look at cutting.
I would not recommend cutting that position, no ma'am. If we want diploma to be effective.
Did you not get what you wanted last year with that position, though?
I'm sorry?
Did you not get what you wanted last year with that position when we added it?
What do you mean, did I not get what I wanted?
The first year, it's your position. You could make it do whatever you wanted to. So were you not satisfied with how it was set up? And this is a change that you're looking at now as far as
a tweak to figure out what worked well and what didn't work well?
Right.
Exactly. So this is a tweak into year 2 to merge it more with curriculum and instruction, so it's more of a seamless unit versus two separate units trying to function together. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Martin, do you want to weigh in?
No, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Ms. Morency?
I want to go back to this. This really bothers me. You have, according to your formula, you have 8 less students at Whitthorne. 8 less teachers than you should have. And at 2 of the high schools, we have 15 more and 13 more than we should have. Everybody else is around the within 2 or 3 of what they need. How does that happen?
Try to follow you, Miss Morency.
So Whitthorne, you say has 46 teachers, and according to your formula, they should have 53.5.
Currently, yes, they currently have 46.
So they're 8 teachers. How are they?
If we right-size them and kind of tweak the ratio, then yes, they would need some more positions. And again,
I mean, everyone else is pretty close. Some are down 1, some are up 3, 4. Brown has 4 more than they need. Baker has 2 less than they need. But then, I mean, Central has 15 more teachers than they need, according to this. Spring Hill has 13 more teachers than they need.
I'm gonna be honest. If we use this as a minimum, then yes, I'll be honest. Now, those principals would say it would be tough. It just means we have to schedule tighter if we had to do this.
Well, of course, because it's going to cut their pay. I'm sorry, but it is. I mean, that's the truth. So letting the principals set that amount, I mean, then every principal would have 15 more teachers.
Well, I think again, it's just my job to kind of show you where we have some room. And again, we do have some differences.
Just looking at this like this, I see a lot of room. I see that there's, most of the schools are pretty much right where they're supposed to be, or less, or a few more. But we have some, and Whitthorne having 8 less really bothers me. Because a middle school, you need those teachers in the middle school.
Correct.
And 8 less teachers than they should have?
Correct.
Do they not know that
it's the
they,
reality of it. It was pretty shocking when we looked at it also. It kind of gives you a real picture.
They have to have more kids in their classes than the other schools. Am I right?
Again, if you look at Whitthorne and Spring Hill, the difference there is about, I think they're 3 to 4 positions off from each other, if you right-sized. Looking at Spring Hill Middle as about a 19-to-1, and right-sizing Whitthorne to about a 20-to-1, so it's a little more comfortable, not so many kids.
Whitthorne says 22-to-1 right on here.
Correct. That's what it is now. We would right-size them the other way, so they would go down to about 20, and they would get 45 classroom teachers. Where Whitthorne jumps up is that they have a lot of SPED students, and so they get 7. They'd be allotted 7 SPED teachers. That puts them at 52, and then they need 1.5 ELL, which gives them the 53.5. So yes, they would need some positions. That's 8
positions. That's a lot.
That's what Whitthorne would need. We recommend if we turn the dial on them, correct?
Because where they currently sit right now, they currently sit inside BEP regulations. So because what happens is if we exceed student teacher ratios, we get a letter from the state that says you need to fix this.
Right.
And so Whitthorne is currently in the threshold of not exceeding, but we could dial that and make it a little bit better. We could do that.
Well,
but they're in the threshold.
I mean, what I'm saying is that why should Whitthorne be at that threshold and our other schools be at a different threshold? Somewhere in there has to be some equity in those things.
Yes, ma'am, correct. And again, if we applied the formula, we'd have to apply the formula and look at everybody. But again, this is, right now on paper, it's just really kind of a hypothetical visual.
I see a lot of room for money.
But going back to the recommendation right now of adjusting the 71-100, not going from here to here, but doing a phase 1. So easing into it slowly, and then next year analyzing where we are and easing a little bit more into it slowly. And again, going back to, these are not ideal situations. But when the county commission sends us back and says you've only got $3 million.
Yeah, but my argument with that is that most of these schools are right where you have them on here.
Some
you have
are.
some below. And so then it's not an ideal situation for them either.
Yeah, agreed.
where they are right now is not an ideal situation.
Agreed. Yes, ma'am.
I agree with this, Morenci. I mean, just looking at this, I mean, not talking about the downsizing, just looking at the first page, there's a lot of things that just don't jive. Just doesn't make sense for one school to have 15 more teachers than you say they need if you downsize, and the other school, Withorn, even downsizing, they would only lose one teacher because they're short now. I just don't understand that.
They're 8 teachers short right
Yeah,
now, if we downsize.
yeah,
According to
right.
this, they're 8 teachers short.
Yeah, there'd be 8 teachers short if we downsize. And I'm just trying to understand, if you can get some information, help understand, it's fine, but I can't understand one school having, I know there's different courses in that, but having 15-plus teachers, and the other school that's right next door having minus 8 teachers, it's hard for me to fathom to figure out.
I'll pick it up.
Oh. Under this formula, when you look at Whitthorne, that would be about an increase of 2 teachers per grade level. So, and where that impacts, Whitthorne will be whatever kind of teaming they have, whether that's 4-man teams or 2-man teams, but probably, a recommendation of adding 2 per grade level, 2 teachers per grade level. And that would kind of, because they're a very large middle school, that would kind of regulate them. That will be the recommendation if we chose to utilize this formula. But again, as you all pointed out, in some of our schools, we are operating a little bit below capacity. In some, we're operating way above. And again, this just kind of shows you where we are as a district in terms of what the ratios look like. Yeah.
Just this comment, a school like Spring Hill and Central, even, I think Culleoka has a bigger high school probably than the other ones, but we don't just offer English, we offer English for regular class, honors class, and AP class. So if you were to back it down, you would be looking at just core subjects. You wouldn't be able to have those college readiness subjects, probably not as much of the low end, that sort of thing. That's one of the, that may be one of the differences in the ratio there, is the difference in, you offer college, career, calculus, pre-calculus, those kind of courses. You couldn't have that. You just have to go to the core curriculum, which is maybe what the small schools that they're doing, that's not good either. They should have all that. That's what.
This actually helps a little bit with your argument for the block, actually. This actually helps your argument. So this actually helps your argument for the block. Because again, when you spread it out amongst a 7-period day, that's, well, right. It spreads it out, so you're getting shorter class periods. So again, I can see both sides. And let me just say for the record, we told principals that we do 2 years. We look at 7-period day for 2 years, and this is really the end of year 2. And then we put it back up for discussion for next year. So
it does take less teachers to do block. It just does.
So I get it.
Okay.
I just wanted to make a general comment about this process and what I've experienced in other districts. Usually, this is like the second step of the budget process. We always started with capital projects, and then enrollment projections were done. And then the enrollment projections were taken and used to do this. And it's always part of the budget. When it hasn't been done, you have a lot of catch-up to do, and it's very painful. And that's where you get your discrepancies with some schools not having enough and some having too many. So usually there's a state standard, and then there's a district standard, if you're able to afford more than what the state requires you to do. So that's like agreed upon ahead of time by the board members what your standard wants to be. And then Ron would work within that framework and look at each class, like special ed would be separate, you know, it wouldn't even be part of it. That has its own criteria. But there would be every classroom, and then there would be an average by grade so that you would stay within the ratios. But if it's done every year, and that's the first part of your step, you already know if you need to add teachers or if you need to subtract or move around within a school. So this is probably like shock for you guys because you haven't had this, and now it has to be caught up, because what happens when you don't do it is your staffing population becomes way bigger than you can afford to maintain. And what happens is you end up not increasing your supply lines, you don't increase your equipment lines, or you totally steal them and you have to pay for everything out of fund balance. But every other line, which is a small percentage of the budget after salaries and benefits, gets robbed to pay for salaries. And then you get to the point where you can't even give a raise. So it's really important that it's kept up all the time. And so that's heading in the right direction, is trying to do that. It's just painful at this point.
Well, I just want to say during that finance workshop, which was really, really good, they talked about this, and because other school systems, the board members were going, how do we get this right? We only get so much money. How do we make sure that each school, and the answer that was provided by a superintendent that has done this before was, you have to look at consolidation. You have to make sure that you're being efficient with your resources. And so, I mean, I'm sure people that are watching this now will be up in arms like they were about right sizing, but I think we're at a point where we got to be real about where we are. And I think it would be helpful if you can provide the information, at least from last year, go through, analyze the BEP, because, like, for example, and I'm just going to use as an example, if Brown has 100 kids in kindergarten, and then we got to have 5 teachers, right? At least 5 per the standards, 20-1. But if we get 101, we got to have a 6th teacher, and BEP pays us 0 for that, right?
You actually have you actually have a K through 3 average. Mm-hmm. So if you go over in 1, you're still looking at they have a maximum class size of 25-1, but you still have that K through 3 average. So you could have a low 3rd grade, a high kindergarten, and you're up a creek.
Right.
Which being a former elementary principal stinks.
So what I'm saying, though, is can y'all do that analysis for our schools for the last year so that we know how much we were really paying, how much we were really being reimbursed for our teachers at each of the schools versus how much really the county is paying for? And honestly, the other thing that the county has to understand is it's basic education program. That's what they told us at the meeting. It's basic. And it never covers it all. But at the same time, it's important for us to know that right now, our county is paying about 6% over what they're supposed to be paying based on the percentages. So I think that makes it a little bit harder for us if we're not using our resources efficiently, which is what that tells me we're doing. No. We're not using what we're given efficiently. So I just need you guys to figure out the efficiency part and make sure that from a BEP standpoint that we know what we're getting, and making sure that we don't have 15 extra teachers at one school that we're paying for completely from the county.
Yeah.
Can y'all do that before the next budget session?
Depends on when the next budget session is. And just to be sure, can you reiterate back the notes that you're writing down to make sure you've got it correctly, please?
Basically, I want to take the BEP funding at each school, and then we'll take the number of students, the number of teachers that we currently have, the funding that we're getting for each school, and then pretty much figure out how much BEP pays for, how much the county pays for, and we'll do that through the ratio of classes, and then, of course, study the BEP for the funding.
Is that right? Okay.
You guys know this better than I do, but
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. We don't work.
Next meeting? next Thursday,
I can send you a copy of
no, it's tomorrow. I'm thinking of tomorrow, yeah.
What about same time next week?
July 3rd?
Oh, no.
What about July 10th, Tuesday the 10th? See, the problem is we're getting close to July the 19th, which is the county commission when we got to present the budget. That's the problem. We're getting really close. I don't know. Is it? Oh, that's right, July the 4th, yeah. July the 9th or July the 10th? And I mean, consequently, I'm going to send you guys something as soon as we're done. I got in touch with Rebecca McFarland. She is interested in working with us for that half day. She leaves out of the country on July the 10th, so she's asking July the 9th from 8 to 12 if we could get together as a board and as a superintendent and begin the process. So I'm going to send that out to you guys to just get your input and see what you think about that. But then she'll be out from the 10th through almost the end of the month. She's going to Scotland. Yeah, we would need at least a good solid week to work on. And then we can also work on the FY19 budget documents based on the conversations we've had tonight to come to a number to bring back to the county commission. We can work on that as well. So we could do dual work. If we can almost have, because we're going to have to load that information within the week, because we'd have to load it by the 4th. And if we can continue to edit it the 5th and the 6th, then that would give us a little bit more time. But we're kind of getting up against a wall here with budget presentation to the county commission.
Could we have it the 9th or the 10th, and then we have a work session on the 16th? We could, if we come to agreement on the budget,
Yeah.
then we could have a special call.
Yes, ma'am.
For the budget then.
That's okay with you guys? Okay.
Ms. Kincher's done such a good job with budget process. I'll leave it in her capable hands.
What's the date?
Either the 9th or the 10th. About the 10th.
Do you have anything else that?
Yeah. So the 10th. 10th, okay?
On the 10th, you bring back all the.
Everything
things
that we're
discussed
talking about.
And so we can see some concrete figures and.
Yes.
And then the other stuff as well. Okay.
And so what we'll do is we'll adjust the FY19 budget to the superintendent's recommendations that you see before you. And the 2% raise is in there. I've left that in there. I seem to think a consensus coming from the group.
This group.
Yes, ma'am. Well, and also talking to David Moore and David Bates, they both said whatever you recommend and whatever the board goes with, we're comfortable with. So we know we've got 2 more that agree as well. They were right in line with you, Mr. Pennings. Whatever you recommend, I'm comfortable in supporting. Thank you guys for the time. Appreciate it. Really appreciate it. Thank you.